He thought it was just another patrol. Then the girl appeared. The rain had been steady for hours. The kind that seeps into your bones. Makes the world feel tired. Travis Maddox sat parked near the edge of Grapevine Street, the engine humming low. Shadow curled in the back seat like an old soldier, resting but never truly asleep. The town was supposed to be calm now, crimes down, reports quiet. But something had been gnawing at him since that strange welfare check 2 nights ago. A locked cellar, a twitchy ex-soldier, and Shadow, suddenly alert, pawing at the porch like he knew. Then came the knock. Soft, hesitant. Travis turned, and there she was, a girl, no older than 8, soaked to the skin, hair plastered to her cheeks, eyes wide but eerily calm. In her trembling hand, she held a silver chain. A pendant glinted in the dark like it had something to say. "Where's your home?" Travis asked gently. She didn't answer, just looked down, then whispered, "Under the stairs." The fog came in heavy that night, rolling off the pine-covered hills like a breath withheld too long. Waverly Falls, always a quiet town, felt quieter, still beneath the steady drum of October rain. The kind of cold that seeped into bone, into memory. Streetlights blurred in the mist, casting long ghosts across the pavement, while wind chimes on old porches rattled with no melody. Officer Travis Hale leaned against the side of his patrol SUV, one boot planted on the bumper, his hands buried deep in his jacket pockets. 39 years old, 8 of them spent trying to forget the fire that had taken his sister, the rest trying to prove he wasn't broken by it. Beside him sat Shadow, his partner, his constant. A 6-year-old German shepherd with a jagged scar tracing down his right flank, a reminder of the meth bust that nearly cost both their lives in the neighboring county. Since then, Shadow walked with a faint hitch in his step, but no one doubted the fire still burned in him. Least of all, Travis. The two shared a silence born not of boredom, but of waiting. Not every night brought action, but every night had weight, especially lately. Travis had been feeling it, a sense, like static in the chest, that something unseen was circling the edges of his world. And then, through the gray shroud of fog, she appeared. At first, just motion. A blur of pink against the gloom, flitting between fence posts like a ghost that hadn't decided if it wanted to be seen. Travis straightened, brows tightening. Shadow stood instantly, ears perked, nose twitching. There was no sound of footsteps. Only the soft squelch of rain on earth, and the far-off whistle of wind carving its way through trees. The figure came closer, small, fast, barely more than a shadow herself. A child. Travis stepped forward, instincts on edge. "Hey!" he called, voice firm but not loud. "Are you?" But before he could finish, the little girl reached the chain-link fence behind the precinct lot, in her hands, a small purple backpack, worn, frayed. She didn't climb the fence. She didn't speak. She simply hurled the bag over with all the force her trembling arms could muster. It hit the wet gravel with a dull slap, and just like that she turned and ran. "Wait!" Travis jogged toward the fence, but she was already vanishing, swallowed whole by the curtain of fog rolling in from the tree line. He shouted again. Nothing. No name. No cry. Just the sound of her breathless sprint fading into the night. Shadow gave a low whine, eyes fixed on the spot she'd been moments before. Then, without waiting for command, he padded to the fence, pressed his nose through a gap, and inhaled deeply. His tail was still no wag, no doubt, only purpose. Travis stared into the mist, frustration blooming behind his ribs. "Where the hell did you come from?" he murmured, mostly to himself. And then, with a breath that turned to fog in the frigid air, he turned to the backpack. It lay in the puddle, like something discarded. But something told him it hadn't been thrown away. It had been placed, like a message in a bottle, desperate to be found. He crouched beside it, the nylon fabric soaked through, one strap nearly torn loose. There was a faint stain near the zipper, dark, uneven. Travis didn't touch it yet. Shadow sat beside him, not barking, not whining, just watching, eyes locked on his partner, like he was ready to translate something Travis couldn't see. Rain continued to fall, tapping the brim of Travis's cap, tracing cold lines down the side of his face. His fingers hovered over the zipper. "You smell something?" he asked softly. Shadow gave the smallest nod. Just a shift in posture. but Travis had known him long enough to read it like a sentence. With care, he lifted the bag. It was heavier than he expected. He didn't know why, but that fact unsettled him more than the stain. And somewhere in the trees behind them, where the fog thickened into something almost alive, a bird took flight in a sudden flutter, then silence again. Travis stood, slinging the bag under his coat. "Come on, boy," he said quietly. Shadow walked beside him as they headed toward the squad car, his gait measured, ears half-cocked. Rain shimmered off his fur like silver thread. Back inside the SUV, Travis sat for a moment without turning the key. The dashboard glowed dim blue, casting half-shadows across his face. In the rearview mirror, the mist outside seemed to press against the windows like a living thing. The little girl's silence lingered in his ears, louder than any siren. He reached over and placed the purple backpack on the passenger seat, the wet fabric hissing softly against the vinyl. Shadow jumped up beside it, curling close, but never touching. Travis ran a hand over his jaw. No name, no cry for help, just a bag and a message no kid should have to carry. He didn't open it, not yet. Instead, he turned his head back toward the trees. Somewhere out there, a child had risked everything to send a signal, and someone had better be listening. Tonight, it would be him. And the dog who never forgot the scent of fear. The rain had softened to a whisper by the time Travis parked behind the precinct. Headlights dimmed, engine idling low. A single overhead lamp buzzed faintly outside the back entrance, casting a sickle of amber light over the lot, catching on the windshield like old bruises. Inside the patrol SUV, time felt oddly suspended. Travis sat still, both hands resting on the steering wheel, his gaze locked on the purple backpack seated beside him. The water from it had soaked through the passenger seat, darkening the upholstery into a shape like a spreading wound. Shadow was in the back, quiet, upright, eyes focused not on the window, not on his partner, but on the bag, as if he already knew, as if something about it had changed the air. Travis exhaled slowly and reached across the console. The zipper stuck at first, damp fabric, swollen and stiff. He eased it open with care, his gloved fingers moving slowly, respectfully, the way one might unwrap a relic or disturb a grave. Inside, no toys, no notebooks filled with hearts or ponies or rainbows, only three things. The first, a plastic Ziploc bag holding what looked like a torn piece of cotton, stained a deep, rust-colored red, the kind of red that told stories in silence. The second, a piece of printer paper, crumpled, smeared with faint water damage. The waxy shimmer of crayon still clung to its surface, barely intact, a child's drawing. In the center, a staircase. Beneath it, a woman lay curled on the floor, hands drawn behind her back in scribbly lines. Beside her, a looming figure, larger, stick-like, but unmistakably male. A metal rod or pipe extended from his hand. There were no faces, only sharp black strokes. Above it all, a small stick figure peered through the stairs, watching. A quiet pressure built behind Travis's sternum. The third item made it worse. A spiral notebook, pages waterlogged at the edges, the cover nearly falling off at the spine. The first page had been written on. The pencil marks were wobbly, heavy in places where a child had pressed hard to make it legible. Some letters were reversed. Others floated unevenly across the lines. But the message came through like a blade. My mom is locked under the stairs. Please don't tell him. No name, no date, no plea for rescue. Just a boundary, a warning. Shadow let out a sound, a low chuff, somewhere between a sigh and a murmur. Not a bark, not a whine. Just breath pushed through the nose, steady, aware. Travis looked at him. The dog had shifted forward in his seat, ears erect, tail low but not curled under. Every inch of his posture said one thing: I smell something. And it wasn't just the cloth. It was what it meant. Travis swallowed hard, throat suddenly dry despite the damp in the air. He picked up the bagged cloth, turned it in his hand. It wasn't fresh. The edges were brown, oxidized. But it hadn't been there long either. The fibers still held shape. The blood hadn't dissolved fully. He'd seen bandage material like that in first aid packs. He'd seen stains like that in evidence rooms. And in one particularly bad case, a burned mattress on the south end of town, he'd seen both. He unfolded the drawing next, tried not to let his breath catch. The stick figure on the stairs. It was small, 2 dots for eyes, no mouth, no arms, just a circle, and terror in the angles. A child who had seen too much and drawn just enough. Shadow whined again, this time higher, then stood, nudged the side of the seat with his snout. He never did that. Not unless there was something he couldn't name but had to move toward. Travis turned the notebook around in his hands, scanning the edges. Nothing else. No names, no threats. Just that one haunting sentence, scrawled in a child's effort to be clear, yet invisible. Please don't tell him. That part stuck, twisted in his gut like barbed wire. Kids didn't write that unless they'd learned through silence, through bruises, through long nights listening to footsteps above the basement door that telling made things worse. That adults couldn't always be trusted. That police might come, but might not stay. He placed the notebook down on the seat beside the drawing and the bagged cloth, arranging them like pieces of a puzzle he already knew wouldn't fit cleanly. His hand lingered on the spiral spine, and suddenly, memory swept in, fast and unwelcome. His sister, 9 years old, a sleepover she never made it to, the fire that started in the neighbor's garage and ate through 3 homes, the way she had knocked, once, on his door as smoke crept under the carpet, and how he, 12 years old and stupid, had told her to go back to bed. She hadn't made it out. His father had never blamed him out loud. But in the silence that followed, in the months of buried grief and whiskey glasses, he'd said enough. Now Travis stared down at another child's knock, this time in the form of a soggy backpack, and he wasn't going to miss it again. Shadow had curled up but kept his head up. His eyes never left the door. Travis zipped the backpack closed slowly. The sound felt too loud in the silence. Then he opened the center console and slid the bag inside, wrapping it in one of his old rain jackets. This wasn't going to evidence. Not yet. He needed time. He needed to know who he was, and where the stairs were. The precinct was quiet after midnight, the kind of quiet that made old buildings seem older, as if the walls themselves were listening. The fluorescent lights hummed low overhead, washing the hallway in sterile blues and yellows, casting long shadows behind every half-closed door. Officer Travis Hale moved down the corridor slowly, the purple backpack cradled under one arm like a fragile truth he hadn't earned yet. Shadow followed silently behind, his claws tapping softly against the tile, head lowered in focus. He never strayed far. The evidence room was just past the briefing office, behind a keypad and a lockbox, like everything else that mattered in law enforcement. But Travis didn't stop there. Instead, he turned into a smaller alcove 2 doors down, where the department kept its old personnel files and unused storage, a place no one checked unless they were asked to. And no one was asking tonight. He slipped inside, flicked on the single desk lamp, and closed the door behind them. Shadow circled once, then settled near the coat rack, his body low but alert, eyes never leaving Travis. For a long moment, Travis just stood there, staring at the bag on the desk. The silence was different now, not empty, but full, like the air had weight. He unzipped the pack again, not for the items, but for the message. He read the notebook a second time, lips pressed into a line. The crayon drawing lay beside it like a confession no adult could have shaped, and the cloth, now sealed tighter in the evidence sleeve he'd repackaged, glared up at him like a wound still warm. He didn't need blood work to know what it was, and he didn't need a child's name to feel what he was feeling. Please don't tell him. It echoed, not just in the air, but deeper, somewhere under his ribs. It wasn't the fear that got to him. It was the restraint, the way the child had asked for help and protection, all in the same sentence, the way she'd drawn danger without naming it, like she knew the world might twist her words against her if she wasn't careful. Travis sat down heavily, rubbed the bridge of his nose with 2 fingers, and leaned back in the chair until it creaked. The office smelled like old leather and mothballs, dust, dismissal. Across from him, Shadow let out a soft, breathy whine. It was a small sound, but deliberate. Travis glanced over. The dog hadn't moved, but his head was slightly tilted now, the way it did when he sensed something his partner hadn't caught yet. It wasn't excitement, it wasn't confusion. It was knowing. You too, huh? Travis murmured. Shadow didn't answer. But he didn't have to. They had been through enough together: raids, fires, nights in the backwoods tracking missing hikers. Shadow had once sniffed out a child locked inside a water tower when the entire force had written the case off as a runaway. There was something about him, something deeper than instinct. Like his body could detect pain that hadn't made a sound yet. Travis stared back down at the desk. Protocol said to log it. Chain of custody. Submit the evidence. File an incident report. Wait for review. Wait for permission. Wait while someone else decided if a 5-year-old girl deserved to be found before her mother's heartbeat stopped for good. He tapped a pen once against the edge of the desk, then again, then stopped. His hand moved with a slowness that came not from hesitation, but from the weight of certainty. He opened the bottom drawer of the desk and retrieved a plain manila folder blank, unmarked, and slid the notebook, drawing, and cloth inside. Then he resealed the backpack, wrapped it in a clean garbage liner from the supply closet, and placed it in a locked drawer beneath the records cabinet. It wasn't going to evidence, not yet. He'd follow the lead, quietly, on his own terms, because something about that little girl, her silence, her precision had felt too practiced. She hadn't cried, hadn't stumbled. She'd waited for the right moment to approach the one place she thought might listen. And the last time Travis had ignored a quiet knock in the dark, it had taken someone from him forever. He looked at Shadow again. The shepherd was standing now, tail still, head forward, like a soldier awaiting command. "You're sure?" Travis asked quietly. Shadow blinked. That was enough. Travis stood, pulled his jacket from the chair, and paused just long enough to slide the manila folder into the inside lining where he'd once hidden field maps during a case near the state line. He flicked the desk lamp off, plunged the room into half-light, and opened the door back to the hallway. Before he stepped out, he reached up to the frame, where an old, cracked photograph hung in a cheap black border. It showed a younger Travis in uniform, stiff and unsmiling beside a man in a brown sheriff's hat, his father. They both looked like they hadn't said what they meant to say that day. And now there would be no more chances. He touched the edge of the frame. "Not this time," he whispered, then turned and walked out. The night was colder now. The fog had thickened again, drifting down the hills like smoke from a fire long extinguished but never forgotten. Travis didn't check in with dispatch, didn't mark himself on patrol. He just got in the SUV, clicked his seatbelt, and started the engine. Shadow jumped up beside him, tail brushing the console, eyes fixed on the road. Somewhere out there, a girl was waiting to see if her gamble had meant anything. And Travis Hale wasn't going to let her down. Not her. Not again. Morning hadn't come yet. The sky over Waverly Falls was still the color of slate and ash, a low-hanging veil of pre-dawn cold pressing against the windshield as Travis sat parked near the edge of the police lot. The heat inside the SUV blew soft and steady, fogging up the side windows where the frost tried to creep in. Shadow sat beside him, tail curled around his front paws, eyes fixed on the dashboard like he was waiting for a verdict. Travis held the spiral notebook in his hands again, the one the girl had left behind. Waterlogged corners, the weight of fear pressed into every pencil line. He hadn't noticed it before, not clearly, but just beneath the message, almost like an afterthought in the bottom right corner of the page, something had been scribbled in red crayon. At first, it looked like nothing. A child's doodle, loops and backward letters. But when he tilted the page under the dim light of the cabin, the outline of numbers began to emerge. A shaky 2, followed by what looked like a reversed 7. And beneath that, Grapin, or Grapine. The E was faint, maybe unfinished, but he knew that street. A long, cracked stretch, running along the east bluff, where the town's old veterans' housing complex stood, surrounded by wire fences and broken porch swings. House 27, Grapine Street. It wasn't enough to call in a warrant, but it was enough for a visit. He folded the notebook gently and slid it back into the inside pocket of his jacket. Then he reached back behind his seat and grabbed Shadow's K9 harness, the matte black one with the faded Velcro patch, still bearing his name. Shadow in white block letters, half worn from years of rain, dust, and time. The dog rose immediately, muscles moving with quiet purpose. Travis slipped the harness over his shoulders, buckled the strap beneath his chest, and gave the side a gentle pat. Let's go see what she was trying to tell us. They didn't use sirens, didn't alert dispatch. Travis drove with his lights off, cutting through the fog like a ghost. The roads were still wet from the night's rain. Leaves stuck to the pavement in dark, soggy spirals. Street lamps flickered and buzzed overhead, some working, some too old to bother. As they turned onto Grapevine Street, the atmosphere changed. This part of Waverly Falls had once been proud housing for returning servicemen and their families. But time had peeled the paint from the walls, cracked the porches, and forgotten the promises made on Dedication Day. Now it sat in quiet disrepair, as if the town had tried to erase it from memory but didn't have the funding to finish the job. Travis rolled the SUV to a slow crawl. Numbers on mailboxes were either missing or hand-painted in haste. Yard fences leaned sideways. Windows were shuttered with old plywood or bed sheets. And then he saw it. Number 27. Barely visible on a splintered wooden beam nailed above a green porch that sagged at the edges. There were no lights on inside, no movement behind the drawn curtains. But the place didn't feel empty. Travis pulled up 2 houses down and parked under the shadow of a pine tree, engine off. He let the silence settle before speaking. "You smell anything?" Shadow didn't move at first. Then his nose twitched once, twice, and he shifted forward, pressing gently against the window. Not a full alert. Not yet. But something was there. They stepped out into the cold, boots and paws crunching lightly on gravel. The chill cut sharper out here, biting at Travis's cheeks as he adjusted his collar. Shadow walked low beside him, sniffing the air, the sidewalk, the base of the chain-link fence. As they neared the porch, Travis's breath caught. At the far corner, beside the second step, barely noticeable unless you were looking, was a faint stain, brownish red. Small, but real. Smeared across a chipped cement edge like something had been dragged or wiped clean in haste. Shadow stopped there, nose dipping to the spot. He didn't bark, but his body shifted ears high, tail stiff, head angled toward the foundation of the house. Then he turned toward Travis and looked up. The kind of look he gave when they were close, when he wanted permission to dig. "You sure?" Travis whispered. Shadow pressed his paw once against the ground. That was all he needed. Travis scanned the porch-cracked boards, a mailbox held shut with duct tape, a door with peeling paint, and a lock that had seen better decades. The blinds inside were tight, sealed. He stepped back and looked toward the yard, unmowed, overgrown, with a rusted garden gnome buried half in dirt. Every inch of the property whispered a simple truth. Something here had been hidden for a long time, but not well, and not enough. He didn't knock. Not yet. This wasn't about confrontation. This was about confirmation. He circled to the side of the house, motioning for Shadow to follow. The dog moved like smoke, low and quiet, pausing only when they reached a narrow side yard. There, beneath a boarded window, was a cellar hatch, padlocked, rusted, and dusted with fresh mud along the edge. It hadn't been opened recently, but it had been used. Shadow's nose pressed gently to the seam. He sniffed, then gave a low chuff, a soft vocalization Travis had come to know as a warning. Someone was, or had recently been below. Travis straightened and looked back toward the porch, where the number 27 hung like a weary sigh. This was it. He could feel it, not in the evidence, not in a file, but in the way Shadow stood, ears forward, body still, as if the very earth beneath them held a story begging to be heard. "Good boy," Travis murmured, kneeling beside him. He reached into his coat, pulled out a pen, and wrote a short line in his notepad. House 27, Grapevine, stain on porch, shadow alert at cellar, no contact yet. He wasn't ready to knock, not until he had more, but something told him this was the place the girl had drawn, and someone inside still hadn't realized that silence wasn't going to save them anymore. The knock was deliberate, 2 short raps against weather-worn wood, not loud enough to alarm, but not casual either. Travis stood on the sagging porch of House 27, posture neutral, badge visible beneath his half-zipped jacket. Shadow sat beside him, still as stone but alert, his body leaning slightly forward, as if listening through the cracks. He hadn't called it in, hadn't notified dispatch. He told himself it was a welfare visit, routine check, neighborhood concern. But the truth sat heavier in his chest. He didn't want anyone stopping him. He could feel it again, that sense of things not said. The same one that crept into his bones the night the girl dropped the backpack. This house was the silence her voice had escaped from. The door creaked open after a long pause. The man who answered didn't speak right away. He was tall, maybe mid-40s, but his face had been aged by something harsher than time. Gaunt, angular features, sunken cheeks, sleepless eyes. A military bearing worn down by disuse and something darker. He wore a threadbare hoodie and jeans, 2 sizes too big, as though the weight he once carried had been shed too fast. His left hand gripped the inside doorframe. The knuckles were white. "Morning," Travis said simply, voice low. "Officer Hale, Waverly Falls, PD. Just checking in. There've been a few reports of camera outages on this block. Noticed your porch light's been out too." The man blinked. "Camera's been out for months," he said. Voice, gravel, and smoke. "Nothing's happened. Ain't no one around here worth watching." Travis offered a small nod, non-committal. "Mind if I step in for a minute?" A pause. The man's eyes shifted to Shadow, who hadn't moved, but whose ears had perked the moment the door opened. The man's body stiffened slightly. "That dog gonna bite? Only if I ask him to," Travis replied, gaze steady. "Name?" "Colt. Colt Merrigan." Travis filed the name quietly into memory. He already knew it from a list buried in the veteran housing roster. But now it had a face. Merrigan looked at him for a beat longer, then stepped aside without a word. The door swung open wider. Travis stepped in. Shadow followed close, paused silent on the warped floorboards. The smell hit first old oil, damp carpet, something metallic beneath it. Not overpowering, but off. The air felt stale. Not lived in, not fresh. The living room was sparse. A single recliner. A coffee table stained with rings. A television from another decade sat atop a cinderblock shelf. No photos, no books, no warmth. "Sorry about the mess," Colt muttered, not sounding sorry. "Ain't much of a host these days." "No worries. You live alone?" Colt nodded, crossing his arms. 10 years now. Got a discharge and a bunch of broken promises. You want to see my VA forms?" "Just routine," Travis said. "Some of the outages line up with activity reports from the neighborhood. You hear anything strange in the last few days?" Colt snorted. "This whole street is strange. Lady across the way talks to mailboxes. Guy next door drinks brake fluid." Shadow moved slowly toward the hallway. Travis tracked him with his eyes, but didn't say anything yet. "You work at the clinic?" Travis asked. "Used to," Colt said. "Volunteered sometimes. Helped move boxes, fix cabinets. That was years ago." "Know a Samantha Quinn?" The name landed like a dropped wrench in a quiet garage. Colt's jaw tensed. "No," he said too quickly. "Never heard of her." Travis didn't push. Not yet. Instead, he watched Shadow reach the edge of a worn rug in front of a narrow hallway. The dog paused, nose low. Then he pawed the corner once slow and deliberate. Colt noticed. "Hey, what's he doing?" "Just sniffing," Travis said calmly. "He's trained for that. Sometimes he smells mold, sometimes rats, sometimes other things." Shadow gave a low breath, not a growl, but not far from it either. His paw nudged the rug again, and Travis stepped forward. "You mind if I take a look under here?" "It's just a rug," Colt said flatly. "Mind if I check that for myself?" Colt hesitated. "You got a warrant?" "Number." "But I'm not breaking anything. Just flipping a corner. Unless you're telling me there's something dangerous underneath." Silence. Then, "Do what you want." Travis knelt and slowly lifted the edge. The wood beneath was old, worn. But there near the side was a faint discoloration, a smear, dried, almost the same shape and tone as the one on the porch. Blood, maybe. Or something close enough to start the clock ticking. Travis let the rug fall gently back. Colt had crossed to the other side of the room, hands now stuffed in his hoodie pockets. "You ever have kids over?" Travis asked, standing number. "See any around lately?" "Number. Purple backpack mean anything to you?" Colt turned sharply. "Number, I don't know what this is. You said it was a camera check." "It was," Travis said, his voice steady. "And now, it's a little more than that." Shadow had shifted again, this time toward the hallway, nose angled toward a closed door near the back of the house. He didn't bark, but his tail went stiff, and he stared, unblinking. Travis followed the gaze, then looked back at Colt, who had gone pale beneath his stubble. "Basement?" Colt didn't answer. But that was enough. Travis didn't draw a weapon. didn't make threats. He simply nodded once and turned back toward the door. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Merrigan." He walked out the same way he came in quietly. Shadow followed, not looking back. On the porch, Travis paused. He wrote a line in his pocket notebook. Subject evasive. Shadow alerted twice. Blood suspected. Request surveillance review. Possible concealed area behind hall rug. Recommend quiet follow-up. He looked down at Shadow, who sat still, staring back at the door. "You saw it too, didn't you?" Shadow didn't move. He didn't need to. They'd be back. And next time, it wouldn't be a visit. The house had that kind of stillness that wasn't peaceful, it was practiced. Inside, the air sat heavy, like old breath trapped behind faded curtains. Travis had walked out once already. He could have left it there. Should have, maybe. No warrant, no call. Just instinct and the echo of a little girl's crayon warning tugging at the back of his mind. But there was a moment on the porch where Shadow stopped at the edge of the steps, looked back toward the door, and didn't move. Just stared, tail stiff, shoulders set. Travis had learned long ago, when Shadow looked like that, it meant something had been missed. So Travis turned around. Colt answered the second knock quicker than the first. His eyes were tighter now, his posture drawn. "You again?" "Just one more question," Travis said smoothly. "Routine follow-up. I promise I won't take long." Colt didn't answer at first. Then he stepped aside with a grunt and motioned with his head. "If it'll get you off my porch." Shadow entered first. No growl, no tail wag, just a slow prowl along the living room edge like he was memorizing every surface. Travis stepped inside and let his eyes drift, not to Colt, but to the corners of the room. The walls had discoloration in places, patches where old picture frames had once hung. The television was muted, playing static. A pile of dishes sat in the kitchen sink behind a half wall, empty beer cans near the trash. The same signs of loneliness he'd seen 100 times before, but something still felt off. Colt leaned against the doorframe again, one arm crossed, the other scratching the inside of his elbow. "You gonna tell me what this is really about?" "Neighborhood report," Travis replied evenly. "Couple of small things lining up strange. We're just closing the loop. I told you. I don't know any Quinn. I don't have any kids. I barely leave the house except to get smokes." "Sure." Travis nodded. His eyes scanned the hallway again. "Mind if I use your restroom before I head out?" Colt hesitated. That was all Travis needed. "It's just down there, yeah?" he asked, already starting down the hallway. "End of the hall," Colt said, tone clipped. Travis walked slowly, letting his boots creak against the uneven floorboards. As he passed the partially open door to what looked like a storage room, he stopped. Shadow stopped too. Inside the room was a clutter of old boxes, newspapers, a disassembled bed frame leaned against the wall. Everything smelled of dust and metal. But near the far wall, half buried under a coat draped across a plastic storage tub, something caught Travis's eye. A small frayed earwhite, matted fur, curled from age or handling. He stepped closer, pulled the coat back with 2 fingers. There it was, a stuffed rabbit. White, stained with age. One ear hanging by threads, the other folded awkwardly against its head. A pink ribbon around its neck, faded to gray. It was the same toy, the one from the crayon drawing. The one the little girl had clutched in those scribbled lines drawn in red and black, next to the stairs and the woman on the ground. Travis crouched slowly, the silence in the room suddenly heavier. He didn't pick it up, he just stared at it. Then, behind him, Shadow moved forward. No bark, no growl, but he stopped beside the toy, lowered his snout, and froze. His ears tilted back slightly, nose to the floor. Then he looked up at Travis. Just looked. The same look from the porch. The same stare from the chain-link fence when the backpack landed. The look that said, "This doesn't belong here, but it's not staying buried either." Travis stood. "Mr. Merrigan," he called out. His voice was calm, but lower now. Footsteps padded behind him. Colt appeared at the doorway, arms folded again. Travis pointed with his chin. "This yours?" Colt looked past him. At first, he didn't answer. Then his face shifted only slightly. "I don't know. Was here when I moved in? Probably the last tenant's kid or something. Travis turned slightly. When was that? Year ago. Maybe longer. You never threw it out? Colt shrugged. Didn't notice it. Travis took a slow step toward him, keeping his voice even. Mind if I ask why there's dried blood on your porch step? Colt's expression tightened. You got a warrant? Number. Just a question. Then I'm done answering. Travis held his gaze for a beat longer, then nodded. He stepped back from the room, motioned for Shadow. The dog followed, silent. Colt stood in the hallway like a guard to nothing, arms crossed, jaw locked. Travis reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook. Wrote a single line. White stuffed rabbit matches drawing. Location. Storage room. Colt evasive. Shadow posture. Alert, but not aggressive. Id. He didn't press further. Not yet. They were too close to spook him. Too close to lose what might still be alive down there. Appreciate your time, Travis said as he reached the door. We'll finish the camera work with the city. Hopefully nothing else pops up. Colt didn't reply. Outside, the air felt sharper. The cold wind bit at his collar again, and the sky had begun to lighten just barely. Hints of pale blue behind gray clouds. Shadow jumped into the SUV without needing a command. Travis climbed in after him, resting his elbows on the steering wheel for a long beat. The rabbit had been real. Not just drawn, not just imagined. It meant the girl had been there, and that meant someone else still might be. As he started the car, Shadow let out a single short breath from the passenger seat. Not a sigh, just acknowledgement. They had a direction now, and Travis wasn't letting it slip. Not this time. The rain had returned by nightfall, steady and soft like fingers, drumming on a memory. It tapped across the roof of Travis's SUV in a slow, measured rhythm, washing the windshield in streaks of water that blurred the glow of the street lamps outside. From his position, parked beneath an old elm tree 2 blocks from Grapevine Street, the house in question lay just out of sight, but not out of reach. Travis sat in the driver's seat, engine off, one hand wrapped around a lukewarm thermos of coffee he hadn't touched in an hour. Shadow lay curled in the back, breathing slow and even, but his eyes hadn't closed once. The dashboard clock read 9:18 p.m. The stuffed rabbit, the stain on the floor, the way Colt Merrigan had frozen when asked about Samantha Quinn. It was all there, circling in Travis's mind like ravens over an open field. He'd seen liars before, seen what guilt looked like. But this wasn't just guilt. This was fear, controlled, but barely. He stared into the rain, letting his thoughts wander back to the drawing, the crude pencil lines, the tiny figure under the stairs. And that sentence, please don't tell him. He didn't know her name, didn't know how long she'd been running, but he knew what it meant to carry something you couldn't say out loud. He'd done it for years after the fire, after his sister. He was still doing it. A sudden movement in the corner of his vision snapped him out of the loop. Something outside, small, moving along the sidewalk. Travis turned his head slowly, and there, just beyond the reach of the street lamp's arc, was a figure in pink. A child. She stood barefoot on the wet sidewalk, drenched from head to toe. Her hoodie, once bright, now clinging to her skin like a soaked rag, drooped over her shoulders. Her hair was plastered to her cheeks, curls matted into dark, dripping vines. Her sneakers didn't match. One of them was untied and dragging behind her like a broken wing. In her hand, she clutched something silver, tight, like it was the only thing that had weight in her world. She didn't wave, didn't cry out. She just stepped closer and knocked. Soft. 3 times. Fingertips on glass. Travis's heart caught. He reached across slowly and rolled down the passenger window just enough for the rain to creep in. The girl didn't flinch. She simply stared at him with eyes too wide for her age, too still. The kind of eyes that had already learned not to ask for anything. "Hey," Travis said gently, kneeling slightly to meet her gaze. "You found me." She didn't speak. She just held out her hand, uncurling her fingers. In her palm lay a necklace, a thin, tarnished chain with a round silver pendant, scuffed but intact. Etched on its surface, faint but still legible, were the words, "Maggie B." Travis took it slowly, carefully, like he was being handed a sacred thing. "This your mom's?" he asked softly. The girl nodded just once. "Is she okay?" She shook her head. Then, In a whisper so quiet it almost vanished in the rain, she said, "She's still under the stairs." Travis closed his eyes for half a second, absorbing the words like a hit to the chest. When he opened them again, his voice was steadier than he felt. "What's your name, sweetheart?" She hesitated, like she wasn't sure it was safe to say. Then, "Ember." He exhaled. "That's a beautiful name, Ember. My name's Travis. And this here's Shadow." At the sound of his name, Shadow rose from the back seat and stepped forward, placing his front paws on the center console. He tilted his head, watching Ember with soft, amber eyes. He didn't bark. Didn't move. Ember stared at the dog for a long moment. "I saw him," she whispered. "Last night, after I threw the bag." Travis nodded. "That was brave. What you did? That was more than most grown-ups would have done." Ember glanced back over her shoulder, as if expecting something to chase her from the shadows. "He doesn't know I got out," she said. "There's a cat flap in the laundry room. I kicked it from the inside." Travis leaned across the seat and gently pushed open the passenger door. Rain spilled in, catching the edge of Ember's sneakers. "You want to sit with us for a bit?" he asked. She paused, then nodded. He helped her in, wrapped a spare flannel blanket from the back seat around her shoulders. She sat quietly, knees tucked to her chest. Shadow laid down beside her, pressing his body just close enough to share warmth. Ember didn't resist. In fact, for the first time she let out a sound that wasn't a word, just a breath. A small exhale, like her lungs had finally remembered how to soften. Travis handed her a juice box from the glove compartment. She stared at it for a second before taking it with both hands, drinking in slow, careful sips. The necklace still dangled from his hand, cold and damp. Maggie B. He knew the name now, and he had the child who wore it around her heart. Whatever this was, it had crossed the line from suspicion to proof. He turned the key in the ignition. The engine rumbled back to life. Beside him, Ember leaned her head against the window, the rain on the other side catching in soft rivulets. Shadow curled at her feet, his tail twitching once, then stilling. "Ember," Travis said quietly, eyes on the road ahead, "we're going to find your mom." She didn't look at him, but she nodded, and that was enough. The rain softened against the windshield, falling now like breath instead of thunder, a hush that folded itself into the quiet of the car's interior. The cabin lights were dimmed, dashboard casting a soft blue glow across Ember's face as she sat curled beneath the oversized flannel blanket. Small hands wrapped around the juice box she hadn't touched since the first few sips. She hadn't spoken again since whispering the words, "She's still under the stairs." Travis didn't press. Silence wasn't always a wall, it was sometimes a bridge, and the way she sat, shoulders hunched like she was used to being small, invisible, spoke louder than fear. Shadow lay on the floorboards near her feet, head resting between his paws, eyes half closed but ears tuned to every breath in the car. His body curved slightly toward her guarding, but without pressure. Travis glanced down at the necklace again, the silver pendant still cool in his palm. It was light, but not meaningless. The chain had broken near the clasp. A link strained and split like it had been pulled off too hard, too fast. "Maggie B." He read aloud softly, not asking, just offering the sound of the name back into the air. Ember's eyes flicked toward him, then back to the necklace. "That's your mom, isn't it?" he said gently. She nodded once. A slight movement, almost imperceptible. "Can you tell me her full name?" Ember tucked her knees tighter beneath the blanket, gaze locked on her soaked sneakers. The right one had a hole in the toe. Her sock striped pink and blue was damp and clinging to her skin. Then, voice barely audible, "Samantha Quinn." Travis exhaled slowly. "Thank you." He let the name roll around in his chest. It felt right. Solid. Real. "Mine's Travis," he said again, keeping his voice soft, steady. "And that's Shadow. He's a pretty good listener." Ember didn't smile, but her gaze drifted toward the dog, and this time, lingered. Shadow tilted his head just slightly, tail giving a single, subtle thump against the floor. "He didn't bark when I knocked," she murmured. "No," Travis replied. "He doesn't bark unless he needs to. He just knows, like a person," she whispered. "Better than most," Travis said. A long pause settled in the car, filled only by the faint hum of the heater and the rhythm of water sliding down the windows. Travis didn't move. He let the silence shape itself around them like a blanket that didn't need stitching, just warmth. After a few minutes, Ember spoke again. Still quiet, but stronger now. She has asthma. Travis turned slightly in his seat. Your mom? Ember nodded. Sometimes when he gets mad, she can't breathe right. The weight of that sentence sat heavy in the space between them. Travis didn't ask who he was. He didn't need to. She keeps her inhaler in the cabinet under the sink, Ember added. But she's not supposed to get up. He told her not to. Travis clenched his jaw gently. Let the words root. Let them anchor what he already knew. And how long has she been down there? He asked, careful not to sound alarmed. Ember blinked slowly. I think maybe 3 days. I tried to bring her water, but the door was locked. I pushed the bottle under the crack. 3 days, maybe more. He looked toward the rearview mirror, saw only wet pavement and the faint shimmer of distant streetlights. Somewhere not far from here, in a sagging greenhouse on Grapevine Street, a woman named Samantha Quinn might still be alive, but barely. And a man one used to barking orders and hiding rot under the floorboards was sleeping upstairs like the world had forgotten her. Not anymore. He turned back to Ember. Why did you come to the police? She shrugged. Mom said if anything bad ever happened, I should find someone in a uniform. That good ones would listen. Travis looked down at his own, now wrinkled from the day's weight, badge scratched at the edge. I'm listening, he said. She nodded again, not with a child's certainty, but with the quiet exhaustion of someone who had already carried too much. He reached into the glove box and pulled out a small packet of trail mix and a granola bar. You hungry? Ember hesitated, then reached for the granola bar and peeled it open. She didn't devour it. She chewed carefully, methodically, like she didn't trust it to stay. While she ate, Travis pulled out his mobile unit laptop, opened a secure file search, and typed, Samantha Quinn, DOB unknown, Waverly Falls area, military, medical service. The name loaded quickly. Samantha Quinn, 34, former Army combat medic, honorably discharged after knee injury. Last known address, 27 Grapevine Street. A chill moved through him, colder than the rain. She'd filed a restraining order against Colt Merrigan 4 months ago. It had never been enforced. 2 months later, she'd been marked missing, presumed voluntary. Voluntary. Travis looked at Ember, at her muddy shoes, her necklace. The blanket clutched around her like it might dissolve if she let go. Ember, he said carefully, you did the right thing. She didn't speak, but her hand slowly reached out across the console and rested on Shadow's fur. Not a pat, not a grab, just contact. And Shadow, as if sensing something deep and unspoken, inched closer. His head found her lap and stayed there. The cruiser was still warm inside, though the rain outside had sharpened into needle-thin streaks tapping rhythmically on the roof. The street lamps flickered gently through the windshield, casting long, soft shadows across the dashboard. Travis had turned the heat up just a little more. Ember sat curled beneath the blanket now like it was a cocoon, her small frame trembling slightly, not from cold, but from something deeper. The kind of trembling that lives in your bones after hiding too long. Shadow didn't move. His head still rested against her thigh, eyes half shut, ears twitching to every sound. Like a sentinel who could sleep with one eye on her soul. Travis watched them for a while, fingers wrapped around his thermos. Though he wasn't drinking, the lid remained untouched. He finally broke the silence. Ember. His voice was gentle, low. Can you tell me how you got out? Her eyes met his in the rearview mirror. No tears, just tired. She nodded faintly. The flap. The flap? He repeated. For the cat. Under the back door. It's old and broken. Mom used to put her foot there to stop it from swinging open when it stormed. And tonight? I pushed it. It made a loud sound, but he wasn't home. That last part, she said it as if that was the lucky part. Not her escape, but his absence. He leaves sometimes, she added, but he locks the door at the top and he hides the phones. How did you reach it? She shrugged. Stood on the laundry bucket. It was wet. I almost fell. Her voice was matter-of-fact, like she was describing brushing her teeth. Nothing heroic. Just what had to be done. Travis's grip on the steering wheel tightened, knuckles pale. He didn't say what boiled in his chest, how easy it would have been for that flap to jam, or that door to not budge, how narrow the window had been. But the girl sitting in his back seat wasn't a victim. She was a survivor. "You knew how to get out," he said quietly. Ember looked down. "She told me, if anything ever happened, and if I had to leave without her, to make it count." Travis's throat worked, slow and hard. "Mom said to find a light. Any light. Even a porch light. She said lights mean someone's watching." "And that's why you came to the station?" She nodded. "I waited by the woods until I saw your car stop. I saw the light. The dog, too." A pause. "He saw me first." Travis glanced toward Shadow. The shepherd's tail gave a small thump again, as if in confirmation. "Good boy," Travis whispered. Then he reached across the passenger seat and pulled the heavy emergency blanket from the storage kit. He opened the door, walked around, and knelt beside Ember's door. Opened it slowly. "Hey," he said, "you mind if I wrap you in this too? This one's warmer." Ember hesitated, then nodded. He lifted the first blanket carefully, then tucked the second around her like he was swaddling something fragile but still burning from within. Her hands disappeared beneath the folds. She didn't shrink from him. Not anymore. As he tucked the last edge beneath her elbow, he sawed a small scrape across her knuckle. Faint, but fresh. "You cut your hand?" She looked down. The porch had nails. Another beat. Then, almost inaudible, "And I had to crawl past the mop." Travis froze slightly. "What do you mean?" She didn't look up. "He uses it to clean after. I don't like it. It smells like rust." The quiet came back again. Not peaceful this time. Heavy. Grieving. Travis stood slowly, swallowed back the things he wanted to say. Words like monster, bastard, not again. Words that didn't belong to a child's ears, even if her life had already seen worse than most adults. He closed the door softly, returned to the front seat, and started typing again into the laptop. His fingers moved faster now. Shadow lifted his head, ears pricking. "You feel it too, huh?" Travis muttered. He wasn't asking, because it wasn't just a case now. It was the case. And more than that, it was a line drawn in the fog. On one side, silence. On the other, this girl, a dog and a cop, who'd lived through fire before and wasn't afraid to walk through it again. Travis glanced back at Ember. "You said he wasn't home when you left?" She nodded. His car was gone. "Do you know when he usually comes back?" She thought for a second. "He watches shows on his phone, the ones with men yelling. Then he comes in after the blue moon." "The what?" She pointed outside. "The lights by the billboard. They turn blue when it's really late, when no one else is walking." Travis exhaled. That meant the man was still out. Maybe an hour, maybe less. He looked at Shadow, then back at Ember. "If I told you we're going to go help your mom right now, would that be okay?" Ember didn't answer with words. She sat up slowly and handed him the broken pendant. Like a key, Travis took it. "All right," he said. "Let's bring her back." He reached for the radio, paused, then changed his mind. This wouldn't be official. Not yet. Because the kind of rot he was dealing with didn't always stay in one house. Sometimes it spread into uniforms and titles and precinct walls. So he pulled a simple notepad from his bag and wrote down, "House 27, Grapevine Street, unauthorized entry if needed." Shadow leads. I follow. Then he folded the page and slipped it into the glove box beside his father's old badge. Ember was resting again now. Shadow curled tighter around her like he was made of wool and quiet and breath. And Travis, he reached for the ignition. The case was over. Now came the rescue. The precinct was nearly empty at this hour. Just the dull hum of the vending machine, the occasional pop of a heating duct settling, and the soft whir of Travis's desktop booting up in the corner. He moved quietly like a man walking through a library of ghosts. Shadow lay curled beside his desk, his eyes open but still. He didn't rest easily anymore, not since the backpack and the drawing. Not since the whimper Ember made in her sleep when Travis tucked her into the cot in the station's break room an hour earlier. Travis had stood in the doorway for several minutes after that, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest, just to be sure. Now he sat hunched over the keyboard, the harsh light from the screen casting sharp angles on his face. He typed in the name. Samantha Quinn. The search engine blinked once. Then the records began to load slow, like something reluctant to reveal itself. The first hit. Army medic. 68 watt. Served 2 tours. Honorable discharge. Last active duty, June 2021. He clicked again. A personnel image loaded, faded from being scanned into the system. The woman in the picture had clear eyes, the same steel gray as Ember's brag. Hair tucked under a standard-issue cap, jaw clenched just enough to suggest strength behind the calm. There were field commendations, too. 1 Bronze Star for pulling 2 wounded soldiers from a burning Humvee during an ambush in Ghazni province. Travis blinked slowly. "You were a fighter," he murmured. "Still are." The next record dropped like a brick into his gut. Missing persons report. Filed. The 13th of November. Reported by Ember Quinn, age 5. Declined by officer of record due to insufficient adult verification. His mouth went dry. He clicked the report. It was barely a paragraph. Subject. Minor arrived at Waverly Falls PD, claiming her mother was taken. Lacked identification. No visible injuries. Report was not escalated. Child released to presumed guardian after verbal clarification provided by Colt Merrigan. And there it was, the name. Colt Merrigan. Travis leaned back in his chair, the weight of it all crashing inward. That Ember had already tried. That she'd come to them once before and been turned away with nothing but a lie and a man's convincing words. And someone, a uniformed someone, had let her walk back into that house. "Jesus," he whispered. He clicked again. This time, it wasn't a report, but a scanned document. Filed 3 months before her disappearance. Restraining order request. Petitioner. Samantha Quinn. Respondent. Colt Merrigan. He opened it. The text was cold, sterile, like all legalese. But between the lines, the desperation burned through. "She fears for her daughter's safety," Travis read aloud. "Says Colt has episodes rage, shouting, prolonged silence. Mentions waking to him digging in the yard at night. Says he keeps the cellar locked." Attached was a photo Samantha's arm with deep bruises, and one of Ember clinging to her mother's waist, partially hidden behind a wall. There was a stamped note across the top. Order not processed. No prior domestic reports on file. Respondent classified as civilian asset. Travis narrowed his eyes. Civilian asset? He opened a secondary database, one most officers didn't bother with. Old departmental records, archived personnel files, military police crossovers. He searched Colt Merrigan. A few entries popped up, but one stood out. 2019 Waverly Falls Tactical Liaison Program. Civilian asset. Affiliated with Deputy Chief Alan Drexler. Travis leaned forward slowly. Drexler? The name tasted wrong in his mouth. The man who now held the second highest seat in the department. The same man who'd fast-tracked promotions, cut budgets, and casually shrugged when asked about missing case files. Travis had always felt something off about him, slick, rehearsed, like a politician wearing a badge. But he'd never had a reason to look closer. Until now. He sat back again, eyes staring at the screen but seeing through it. This wasn't just about one girl. This was a chain quietly linked through redacted files, closed-door meetings, and decisions made in the name of order. He stood, walked to the evidence locker, and pulled out the purple backpack Ember's, quote. He'd kept it off the books, entered it under unclaimed lost property. No one had asked questions. Not yet. Inside, he found the folded drawing again. The woman under the stairs, the rabbit, the pendant. But in the corner, what he hadn't noticed before was a small set of numbers scribbled in red crayon. 27 Graham, Grapine Street. The same address from the notebook. His breath caught for a moment. There was something about how a child's truth cut cleaner than any report or photograph. She hadn't just drawn it. She knew it. He replaced the items carefully, then clicked back into the terminal. With a few swift keystrokes, he started compiling a folder. Unofficial, off-network. Labeled simply, Ember Case, Shadow Trail. It wasn't protocol. It wasn't sanctioned. But as the screen filled with evidence, images, redacted names, ignored pleas, he knew something else. It was real. And they were going to need more than warrants soon. They were going to need courage. He glanced down at Shadow, still resting. "You ready to keep going?" he asked softly. Shadow's tail gave a single tap on the floor. Quiet. Steady. "Yes," Travis said. "Me too." The next morning brought no sunlight, only gray sky pressed low like a hand-smothering breath. Travis sat at his desk with coffee, gone cold. The steam long faded, much like the warmth in his chest. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, the silence thick around him. In the break room down the hall, Ember still slept beneath a threadbare blanket. Shadow curled against her side like a silent oath. He turned back to the screen. The file he'd compiled last night, Ember Case, Shadow Trail, glared back at him, incomplete and stubborn. There was a single thread he hadn't pulled yet. Colt Merrigan, civilian asset. What did that even mean in a town like Waverly Falls? The term civilian asset wasn't something you saw often outside of joint military police task forces, projects that blurred the line between public duty and private allegiance. The kind of title given to men who were useful but couldn't wear a badge, men who knew things, or kept them quiet. Travis clicked into the archived liaison database again. Merrigan, Colt E. Affiliation, Tactical Psychological Operations, 2017 to 2019. Status, civilian asset. Assigned officer, Deputy Chief Alan Drexler, then Lieutenant. He leaned back, the name settling like dust in his throat. Drexler. He remembered him from years ago, always just a little too polished. Hair never out of place. Tie knotted like a campaign poster. The kind of man who remembered birthdays and shook hands too tightly, who could flip a tragedy into a promotion faster than the ink could dry. And he remembered something else. The way Drexler stood at his father's funeral, hand on the casket like it belonged to someone else. The way he gave that speech about loss, honor, and community without once looking at Travis. A speech that felt rehearsed, like it had been written before the gun ever fired in those woods. It was a hunting accident. That's what they'd all said. Over and over. Like a prayer no one believed. But Travis never forgot the unease in his mother's eyes. Or how the report came back with 3 missing pages. How the trajectory of the bullet didn't match the angle. How no one ever found the shell casing. And how, just 6 months later, Alan Drexler became deputy chief. Now that same man had quietly signed Colt Merrigan into the department's asset program. He clicked deeper into the record, but most of the files had been scrubbed. Just fragments remained, coded phrases, blacked out lines, subject deemed valuable for off-grid recon. Behavioral irregularities noted, but contained. Override granted. Internal incident sealed per chief directive. Project Backyard Echo terminated May 2019. Backyard Echo. He'd never heard of it, but it sounded like something never meant for daylight. Travis exhaled hard, jaw tight. The picture was forming now, grainy, cracked, but real. A former soldier with violent tendencies granted special clearance, a restraining order ignored. A child turned away, and a woman now missing beneath stairs, her voice nearly erased. He grabbed his notepad and scribbled a single word. Why? Why would Drexler protect a man like Colt? What did Merrigan know, or do, or hold over him? He pulled up Drexler's profile. Decorations. Public commendations. A dozen press photos from community events. There he was shaking hands with senators, receiving an award for ethical leadership, his smile cut from marble. But the deeper Travis searched, the thinner the trail became. Requests to view older case logs under Drexler's command met with access denied. Files marked privileged. Even internal memos were locked behind passwords that required chief-level clearance. And Travis wasn't chief. He wasn't even supposed to be looking. But this wasn't just a file. It was his town, his blood, his name, and his ghosts. He opened a side drawer and pulled out an old photo, one that stayed buried beneath paper clips and forgotten forms. It was a photo of his father, Sheriff Will Maddox, standing beside a young Drexler in front of the Waverly Falls courthouse. Both men in uniform, both holding the ribbon to a new K-9 wing where Travis had once stood as a boy, holding Shadow's leash during the dedication. He stared at his father's face. There was no fear in those eyes, only clarity, the kind that didn't play well in backroom politics. Maybe that's why he died. Dad, Travis murmured, fingers curling around the frame. What the hell did you know? Behind him, Shadow stirred. Travis didn't turn. He didn't need to. The dog's ears were up, his body still, watching, sensing the shift in the air. And something in Travis, something old, buried deep, clicked into place. This wasn't about Ember anymore. Not just. This was about a town that swallowed the weak, rewarded silence, and promoted those who knew how to bury truth beneath paper. And if Drexler had helped cover for Colt, if he turned a child away, let a woman disappear, then this wasn't just corruption. It was complicity. Travis opened a blank file and began a new report. Not for the system, not for court, for truth. He labeled it simply, Echoes Beneath, Mad Doc's Journal, and below it he wrote, If something happens to me, start here. And the wind had a strange way of breathing through Waverly Falls, soft enough not to rattle the blinds, yet sharp enough to raise the hairs on the back of your neck. Travis sat alone in the dim watchroom, light from the wall of monitors flickering across his face. It was past midnight, the kind of hour where lies sleep easily, and the town pretends it's whole. But tonight, the silence wasn't just heavy, it was curated. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes narrowing at the timestamp feed marked Gray Pine Street, Sector C7, House 27. Buffering. He hit rewind. 2 hours. 4. Nothing but a blue screen that said, Feed interrupted. Maintenance protocol active since 3:01, the 26th of July. 3 days. 3 entire days of missing surveillance. Centered around the one house he couldn't get out of his head. House 27. The Merrigan property. The cellar with no light. The rabbit with one torn ear. And the little girl who'd whispered, She's still under the stairs. Travis clicked through other cameras. Sector C5, active. Sector D1, glitchy, but there. Sector C7, all angles, feed interrupted. Maintenance protocol, all, except Gray Pine's neighboring streets. He felt something cold settle under his ribs. It wasn't just coincidence anymore. Someone had turned off the eyes. Not all of them, just the ones that mattered. He clicked into the city's public works portal, a system few patrol officers ever bothered with. A maze of access logs and tech repair orders, most filed by drones, auto-stamped with initials. Until he found it. Gray Pine Sector Surveillance Maintenance Request. Authorized by DC-AD Rexler. Timestamp, the 26th of July, 3 o'clock. Reason, overload filter recalibration, camera static and flicker interference. Travis stared at the screen, motionless. The mouse cursor blinked like a silent dare. Of course, he murmured, right after Ember's backpack appeared. Right before the welfare check visit with no evidence collected. Before the rabbit, before the stare from Shadow that said everything words couldn't planks. He sat back in his chair and exhaled slowly. No one had believed Ember. Not the system, not the higher-ups. And now, the only eyes that could have proved she was telling the truth had been shut not by chance, but by permission. Shadow, curled nearby under the desk, lifted his head, as if sensing the shift in energy. His ears didn't twitch. His breath didn't quicken. He just stared. Travis felt it too. A silence too perfect. He reached into his drawer and pulled out the encrypted USB he kept for personal logs, the one no system could trace. Plugged it in. Opened a hidden document he'd labeled Cold Light years ago. He began to type, Camera interference. Gray Pine Street. Matches Merrigan residence. Disabled under direct order of Deputy Chief Drexler. Correlates with Ember Quinn's timeline and Shadow's reaction to interior. This is not system error. This is erasure. He paused. His fingers hovered above the keyboard, caught in a memory. The old back hallway in the Maddox house. The morning after his dad's funeral. He was 15. Rain on the window. His mom sitting in the dark, coffee untouched, whispering to no one. Will kept records they didn't know about. Travis had searched for those records once. Found only a box of worn cassette tapes and a folded note. If you want truth, don't speak it where they listen. He hadn't understood it then. Now he did. He saved the file, pulled the drive free, slipped it into the pocket of his jacket, not the patrol coat, but the old brown one he wore off duty. The one with the stitched tear in the sleeve, the one his dad had left behind. This wasn't a case anymore. It was a line in the sand. He locked his screen, turned off the room's lights. As he stepped into the hallway, he glanced once toward the break room, where Ember still slept on the fold-out cot. Her small body curled toward Shadow, who now lay beside her like a black and tan guardian drawn from another life. Her silver pendant, the one with the initials SQ, glinted faintly under her hand. Travis stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching. A child who had survived more than most adults. A dog who saw what others missed. And a silence that spoke louder than screams. He whispered, barely audible, "Not this time." Then he stepped out into the rain, which had begun again, not loud, not hard, just steady. As if the town itself had exhaled a truth it couldn't hold anymore. The street was silent in the way only small towns could be at 3 a.m. No traffic, no porch lights, just the sound of distant wind scraping dry leaves across cracked pavement. The moon had disappeared behind a dense quilt of clouds, and House 27 stood like a relic that refused to crumble. A husk, watching. Travis parked 2 blocks away. No headlights, no radio chatter, just him. The echo of his father's badge number still burned into the leather holster strapped to his chest, and the steady breath of the dog beside him. Shadow, alert as always, sat in the passenger seat, his posture taut but quiet. Not nervous, ready. The kind of ready that came from scars. Travis stepped out first, his boots crunching softly on gravel. The old flashlight he carried gave only a muted halo of yellow. It wasn't much, but it was enough to follow the path along the rear fence line, through the overgrown patch of weeds that Colt Merrigan hadn't bothered mowing in months. The cellar doors were just behind the house, angled low like a pair of steel eyelids nailed shut. Shadow trotted beside him, nose to the ground. When they reached the rusted handles, the dog stopped. His ears pivoted forward. No growl, no whine, but the stillness of him said everything. Something was down there. Travis knelt. The lock had been replaced since their last visit, a newer model, polished, too clean for the rest of the house. But Travis had come prepared. From the inside pocket of his coat, he pulled out a slim crowbar. Not regulation, not reported. Just the kind a father might have left behind for jobs that no one ever asked about. With a grunt and a firm twist, the lock popped, falling into the wet grass with a dull thud. He paused, one hand on the metal handle, the other resting just over Shadow's shoulder. "You ready?" he whispered. Shadow's only answer was a low exhale, then a slow shift forward. His body language was unmistakable, not fear, not aggression, a kind of sacred tension. Dogs knew things humans hadn't earned yet. Together, they pulled open the doors. A groan of rusted hinges split the air, louder than any siren. The stairs beneath were made of old cement, chipped and laced with moss. Moisture clung to the walls. The smell hit first earth, mildew, and something else. Something faintly coppery. Travis raised the flashlight. The beam trembled slightly as he descended, his boots echoing against the hollow silence. Shadow moved ahead, silent but sure. Halfway down, Travis caught the glint of something caught in the crack of a stair. He bent down. A single sequin, blue, like the kind sewn onto a child's backpack. His jaw tightened. At the bottom, the cellar opened into a wide, unfinished space. Exposed piping, water damage, boxes stacked in one corner, some marked with faded military tags. And there on the far wall, a narrow wooden door, low, almost hidden behind an old refrigerator. Shadow froze. Then he took one slow step forward, then another. His nose brushed the door's baseboard. And then, softly, so softly, it might have been a breath, he let out a whine. Travis's flashlight landed on something tucked behind a paint can. A stuffed animal, white rabbit, one ear missing, matted with grime. His breath caught. She was telling the truth the whole time. He stepped closer to the door. The handle was old brass. He tried it locked, but Shadow didn't wait. He circled once, then planted himself beside the frame, tail stiff, body still, gaze locked on the baseboard. And then, a sound. So soft it might have been mistaken for imagination. A scratch. Then silence. Then again, scratch, scratch, deliberate, weak. like someone who had nothing left, trying anyway. Travis dropped to one knee. "Samantha?" His voice cracked on the name, like it didn't belong to him yet. No answer. He looked to Shadow. The dog's eyes were fixed. His chest barely moved, but his focus had narrowed to a single point: that door. Without thinking, Travis reached for the crowbar again. One firm wedge at the top, then the bottom. The wood splintered on the third push, groaning open with a gasp of stale air. He raised the flashlight. What he saw made his stomach lurch. A tiny crawl space, no more than 4 feet deep, 2 high. The walls padded with old insulation, and in the corner, curled beneath a threadbare blanket, was a woman. Eyes sunken, skin bruised, arms wrapped tightly around her knees, as if she'd spent every moment in that darkness, willing herself not to vanish. Her lips trembled. Don't tell him I'm here." Travis dropped to his knees, his voice shaking. "Samantha Quinn? I'm Officer Travis Maddox. You're safe now." Shadow crept forward, slowly, carefully, lowering himself to the ground in front of the crawlspace, not barking, not forcing, just being there. The woman's gaze shifted, from the officer to the dog, and something in her expression, panic, then disbelief, then something softer flickered through the trauma. She whispered one word. "Ember?" Travis nodded, eyes blurring. "She's safe." The air in the basement had shifted. Even after rescuing Samantha Quinn from the crawlspace, something about the shadows still felt wrong, incomplete, like a breath held too long. Travis could feel it in his gut, the way his father used to describe before a storm. "It's not the thunder that gets you, son. It's what you don't hear." Samantha had been taken out through the storm doors minutes ago, cradled in the arms of an EMT who whispered like she was made of glass. Ember was safe, waiting at the hospital. The moment should have brought closure, but it didn't, because Shadow hadn't moved. The German Shepherd stood statue still in a far corner of the basement, past the furnace, past the moldy shelving. His ears were forward, his body low. He was staring not at the obvious places, but at something hidden behind a tangle of plastic tarps nailed lazily to a concrete wall. Travis followed his gaze, breathing shallow. The tarps rippled gently in the damp air, stained with age and mildew. They weren't meant to conceal something from dust. They were meant to hide something from view. He approached, one slow step at a time. Shadow didn't bark. He just whined a deep, almost mournful sound that trembled through the stillness like a string being pulled too tight. Travis reached out and tugged the edge of the tarp aside. Behind it was a wooden door, not the kind you'd find in a basement for tools or storage. This one was older, handmade, its frame uneven, wood swollen from moisture. It looked like it had no business being there, like it had been installed not for access, but for sealing something in. Across the middle, a thick iron padlock gleamed, new, too new. He ran his fingers across the grain. The wood was warm to the touch, almost sticky. And beneath the hinges, something had seeped. Dark, viscous, unmistakable. Blood. Shadow pawed once at the floor, then sat, as if waiting for permission. Travis stared at the lock. His fingers hovered over it, then clenched. There were no legal channels left now, no backup, no warrants. But the child had come. The woman had whispered from a darkness no human should survive. And Shadow had led him here, not with barks or teeth, but with silence that screamed. He pulled out the crowbar again. It took 3 hits. The lock groaned, snapped, and clattered to the floor like a shackle finally giving way. The moment the door cracked open, the air changed. Not just the smell, though it hit like a wave. Metallic, sour, wrong. But the weight of it. Something heavy lived on the other side of that door, not in body, but in memory. It was the kind of space that remembered screams. Travis lifted the flashlight. Inside was a small chamber, no wider than a closet, but lined with thick insulation and tar paper. Chains hung from the ceiling, slack now. In the corner, a mattress, soiled and rotting. Flies moved lazily above it, too bloated to buzz. There was a broken radio in the corner, and beside it, a plastic lunch tray, empty, chewed on the edges. But it was the walls that made Travis recoil. They weren't painted. They were scratched hundreds of lines, etched with fingernails or the edge of a belt buckle. each one desperate. Some overlapped, some spelled words. No more. He hears everything. Ember's birthday, 5/12. And beneath them all, as if burned into the wood itself, "Don't forget me." Travis stepped back, his vision swimming. Shadow nosed his hand. Not panicked, just there. Like always. Grounding. This wasn't just a place Colt Merrigan used for abuse. It was a shrine to control, a bunker of cruelty. Travis swallowed bile. "She lived in here," he whispered. "For weeks, maybe months." Shadow lowered himself beside the doorframe, refusing to enter. Not out of fear, but respect. Travis stepped inside anyway. He knelt by the mattress. Beneath it, half stuck to the floorboards by dried blood, was a faded photograph. He peeled it up slowly. A young Samantha in uniform, smiling, holding a newborn baby. Ember. The photo had been stabbed through with something sharp, a screwdriver maybe, right through Samantha's eyes. Travis clenched the image in his fist. He looked again at the words on the wall. "Don't forget me." Then he turned to Shadow. "We're not done." The dog rose without a sound. Together, they stepped out of the chamber. But before leaving, Travis reached back and shut the door again. Not to hide it, but because some doors, you needed to close yourself. Not with fear, but with purpose. The air was thick, not just with the scent of rot, but with something older. Suffering leaves a residue, and in this place, it clung to the walls like soot. Shadow lingered at the edge of the dark crawl space, unmoving. Travis knelt down, flashlight trembling slightly in his hand as he followed the thread of silence deeper into the chamber behind the tarp-covered door. It wasn't a room. It was a tomb that had forgotten how to die. And then a sound. Not loud, not even clear, but unmistakably human. A breath that rattled, barely there. A soft, raw groan. Travis froze. His heart thudded in his throat. He shone the beam forward, tracing the cracked floorboards until it found her. Samantha Quinn. She was curled in on herself, knees to chest, limbs bound at the ankles and wrists by old cloth strips. Her skin was pale, almost translucent in the cold light. Lips cracked, eyes swollen shut. Her body so still, he thought. For a split second, he was too late. But then her fingers moved, just slightly. Not to defend, but as if reaching for something only she could see. "Ma'am?" Travis whispered, his voice choked with a reverence he didn't know he still carried. "Samantha Quinn?" The name barely left his mouth before Shadow moved slow, measured, pressing his nose to the base of her feet and then gently laying down beside her. Not wagging, just being there. Samantha flinched, as if expecting a blow. Travis set the flashlight down and dropped to his knees. "I'm a police officer," he said softly. "My name is Travis. You're safe now. I swear it to you." Her eyes fluttered. And then footsteps above. Soft, hesitant, too light to be a man. A voice. "Mommy?" Travis turned just as Ember appeared in the threshold of the door. She was soaked from the rain. Cheeks flushed from crying. Hair sticking to her forehead like spider silk. She had followed him. Alone. Before he could stop her, she dropped to her knees and crawled toward her mother. No fear. No doubt. Just raw, childlike instinct. "Ember, wait," Travis began, but the words fell apart as the girl reached her mother's side and placed one trembling hand on Samantha's cheek. Samantha's eyes, foggy and rimmed with bruises, opened fully for the first time. She tried to speak, but only a rasp came out, then tears not from pain, but recognition and grief. Ember leaned close and whispered through her tears, "I found you. I won't let you be cold anymore." She unzipped her coat, the too big one Travis had given her 2 nights ago, and draped it over her mother's broken frame. Then she lay beside her, head resting against her ribs, listening for a heartbeat. Travis stood motionless, jaw clenched, unable to look away. For all his training, for all the wounds he'd carried from his own past, he had never seen something as quietly devastating as this. A child, refusing to let her mother die in the dark. A child who had carved an escape route through fear and now returned to bring someone else out with her. Shadow shifted, pressing his body closer to both of them, eyes calm and alert, like a silent sentry. "Samantha," Travis murmured again, kneeling beside them now. "Help is coming, just hold on." But she didn't look at him. Her gaze remained locked on her daughter, fragile but fierce. "Ember," she rasped, the word nearly undone by blood and air. "I'm here, Mommy," Ember said again, louder this time. "I brought him. I brought the dog, too. He listens better than the people." Travis blinked hard, throat tightening. "I know," he whispered, to no one in particular. "He does." And from above, the faint sound of approaching sirens filtered in through the cellar doors. Shadow didn't move. He watched Samantha, then Ember, then Travis, then lowered his head onto his paws. Calm, vigilant. The moment held fragile, suspended in time like a snow globe after the shake, waiting for everything to settle. Travis reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the crumpled drawing Ember had given him that first night, the one with the woman drawn under the stairs, beside the stuffed rabbit and the words, "Don't tell him." He looked around. Every line had been real. Every childish stroke had pointed to truth. And still no one had believed her, except the dog, and the man who used to be a boy who cried, alone, in a police station with no one to listen. "I believe you now," he whispered, crouching down to wrap his arms around them, both mother and daughter. "And I won't let go." As the first responders burst through the storm cellar and the lantern light flooded the chamber, Travis didn't move. He stayed there, with them, and Shadow did too. The fluorescent lights in the precinct evidence room buzzed like distant wasps, too high, too harsh, and always a little out of rhythm. It was past 3:30 in the morning, and Travis's world had narrowed to a single steel table, a purple backpack, and the low, steady breathing of the dog beside him. Shadow lay at his feet, head between his paws, ears twitching now and then toward the hum of the cooling vents. Every so often, he'd lift his gaze, checking on Travis the way a lighthouse checks the sea, constant, wordless, unwavering. Travis unzipped Ember's backpack for the 4th time. He'd already cataloged the drawing, the blood-stained cloth, the battered spiral notebook, and a handful of broken crayons. Yet something kept him searching, the nagging sense that a child clever enough to slip through a cat flap and map her mother's prison would leave more than one breadcrumb. He turned the pack upside down and shook. A thin shower of grit and lint rattled onto the steel. That was all. Nothing else. Number A, tiny thud. Something hard had struck the table and skittered toward the shadows beneath the lamp. Travis stilled. Shadow's head shot up, ears sharp. With 2 fingers, Travis nudged the object into the light. A flash drive, no bigger than his thumb. Black plastic, cracked at the corner like it had been stepped on. A strip of skateboard grip tape wrapped around the body, probably to keep it from slipping out of small fingers. On the tape, scrawled in pink gel pen, was a single, shaky letter. Ember's signature, just like the corner of her drawing. Travis exhaled. "Smart kid," he murmured. He slid the drive into a secure evidence laptop, one not hooked to department servers. A precaution he'd learned from his father. Keep your truths off the network when the network might be compromised. The loading icon spun. For a breathless second, he saw only empty folders. Then a single audio file populated time-stamped 6 weeks earlier. Play. Me. MP3. He pressed space. Static hissed. Then a scrape metal against metal. The acoustics suggested a small room, maybe the basement he'd just left. Then a voice, Colt Merrigan's low, slurred with either whiskey or rage. "You keep your mouth shut, Sam. You so much as breathe this to anyone. And Drexler will bury it just like he buried Travis's old man." "Oh." A sharp intake of breath, Samantha, muffled. Colt's boots pacing. "You think that cop's gonna save you? He can't even save himself. His daddy poked around places he shouldn't, and now he's fertilizer for pine trees. Drexler sees everything, Sam. Everything." Silence. A slap. Samantha's whimper. Then Colt again, nearer to the mic. "All you gotta do is stay quiet. My orders are simple. Watch. Keep her in line. Report to Drex once a week. No squealing, no evidence. You make noise. You disappear. End of story." More static, like the recorder had been shoved into cloth. Then Colt's parting words, almost casual, drifting off as he climbed the cellar stairs. "One day, you'll thank me for keeping you alive this long." Click. The file ended. Travis sat frozen, heartbeat drumming in his ears. Shadow rose, sensing the change in his scent, and pressed his muzzle against Travis's knee. Like he buried Travis's old man, Travis repeated under his breath, the words tasting like rust. So it hadn't been a hunting accident. His father stabbed by the same rot now choking this town. He copied the file to 2 encrypted drives. One slipped into his inner pocket, the other taped under the steel table for contingency. Then he opened his private case log. Evidence. Flash drive. Mark. Ember. Audio confirms direct link. Merrigan. Drexler. Sheriff Maddox's death. Implication. Long-term cover-up. Sanctioned intimidation. Possible homicide. He paused, teeth grinding. The screen's glow bleached the edges of his vision, but his mind felt sharper than it had in years. In the hallway beyond, the building creaked, the old bones of a station pretending to be asleep. He knew if he forwarded this file up the chain tonight, it might vanish by sunrise, swallowed by the same maintenance screen that had erased Grapehine's cameras. He needed leverage before daylight, proof in multiple hands. He dialed his personal contact list and tapped a name he'd avoided for months, Mayor Maeve Hastings, his father's oldest ally. 2 rings, a groggy voice. Cross. It's 3:50. Somebody better be dying. Someone almost did, Travis said, keeping his voice low. I've got an audio confession tying Deputy Chief Drexler to a kidnapping and to my father's death. Silence, sharp as broken glass. Then the mayor's tone cleared. Are you certain? As certain as a daughter in a crawl space and a mother with rope burns. Bring it to me at City Hall. 1 hour. Back entrance. The line went dead. Travis closed the laptop and scrubbed the file history. He slipped the primary drive into a leather pouch labeled Evidence B, sealed it, and locked it in his jacket. Shadow nudged him once. Ready. Travis gave a single nod. Time to wake the town. They moved down the corridor, past sleeping detectives and flickering exit signs. Somewhere behind them, the evidence room's light clicked off, swallowing the place in darkness again. But in Travis's pocket, the USB felt warm like an ember, refusing to die. The clock on the dashboard glowed softly 4:12 a.m. Waverly Falls was still asleep beneath a thick velvet darkness. Streetlights stretched long and hollow against empty roads, painting Travis's reflection onto the windshield as he waited outside City Hall. Beside him, Shadow sat alert, eyes calm but watchful, a silent guardian, sensing the fragile pulse of this moment. The radio murmured static whispers, a comforting sound Travis had learned to rely on during long patrol nights. But tonight, comfort felt like a stranger. Tonight, he wasn't wearing a badge. He was holding a fragment of truth sharp enough to cut away decades of silence. A pair of headlights rounded the corner. Low beams swept briefly across his face, settling gently as a black sedan rolled slowly into the spot beside his unmarked SUV. The engine idled softly, headlights dimming, but no one got out. Travis recognized the vehicle. Mayor Maeve Hastings, careful even in the quietest hours. He stepped out, closed his door carefully, and motioned Shadow to stay. The shepherd settled back, watching him approach the car with quiet intensity. He tapped gently on the window. It slid down slowly, revealing Maeve Hastings. Her silver hair was tied back neatly, but her eyes looked worn, pulled taut by the weight of too many long nights. She wore no makeup, just the stark honesty of a face shaped by decades of integrity and struggle. You look more like your father every time I see you, Travis, she said quietly, her voice tired but affectionate. He smiled briefly. Funny how people keep saying that. She tilted her head slightly, a knowing gesture. Some truths just grow stronger over time. He took a breath. Speaking of truths, Maeve, I've found something. She watched him steadily. Her eyes, clear and cautious, waited patiently for the words she knew were coming. What kind of something? He reached carefully into his jacket, pulled out the sealed envelope, and handed it through the window. An audio recording implicating Deputy Chief Alan Drexler in Samantha Quinn's kidnapping and in covering up my father's death. Maeve's hand paused mid-air, the envelope suspended between them. Her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly before pulling it slowly inside. You sure about this? Clear as daylight, Travis said firmly. Colt Merrigan, under Drexler's direct order. He mentioned my father by name, said Drexler buried it like he buries everything else. Maeve exhaled softly, eyes closing for a heartbeat. When she reopened them, they held a determination that made Travis's breath hitch. She was one of the few remaining bridges between what his father had built and what this town had become. "Travis, I've known Alan Drexler since he was a rookie," she said quietly. "Always ambitious, always hungry, never liked losing control. But murder? Cover-ups? Those are bold accusations. I didn't make them, Merrigan did. And Ember's life proves he meant every word." She nodded slowly, processing, turning the envelope over in her hands. "You have copies?" "Multiple. Hidden and secure. I won't risk losing this to another convenient malfunction." She understood exactly what he meant. Too many camera feeds down, too many reports filed away, too many loose ends tied with quiet efficiency. Maeve looked toward City Hall, its facade pale beneath the dim streetlights, and spoke almost to herself. "Your father and I came into politics to keep this town honest, Travis. Somewhere along the line, that honesty stopped mattering. It matters now." "Yes," she whispered. "It does." She reached into her glove compartment and withdrew a phone, typing a number from memory. Her voice lowered as someone answered. "Judge Teller. It's Maeve Hastings. I apologize for the hour, but I need your help immediately." "No, it can't wait." Travis stood close enough to hear only fragments the urgency, the soft plea. "Yes, it's about Alan Drexler. Credible evidence. I wouldn't call if it wasn't critical. No, quietly. Now." She ended the call, exhaled deeply, and set the phone down with deliberate calm. Her fingers rested gently on the steering wheel. "Teller's drawing up a warrant. We'll have it in 30 minutes. You've made enemies tonight, Travis. And I've always had them," Travis replied softly. "They just have faces now." Maeve gave a weary, proud smile. "Like father, like son." Then more quietly, "He'd be proud of this moment, Travis. Proud that you didn't let him disappear without answers." Travis nodded slowly, swallowing the tightness in his throat. "I won't let it vanish again." "I know," she said gently. "But be careful. Drexler's not just a badge. He's a web. The people tangled up with him won't let this truth surface without a fight." "Good," Travis said quietly, feeling the weight of his father's old revolver tucked into the small of his back. "I'm ready." Maeve studied him one last moment, her gaze softening. "I see your father's courage. His stubbornness, too." Travis smiled thinly. "Maybe that's exactly what this town needs right now." She started the engine, headlights flickering to life, casting pale beams across his chest. "The warrant will be waiting at the judge's chambers. Keep your head down until then. If Drexler senses this is coming, he'll strike first." Travis stepped back. "Understood." As Maeve's car pulled away, fading into the empty street, Travis returned to his vehicle. Shadow's head tilted, ears attentive. "Looks like we're waking some ghosts tonight," Travis whispered, running a hand over Shadow's warm fur. "Think you can handle that?" Shadow didn't bark. Instead, he pressed his head gently against Travis's chest. A silent, steady answer. Together, they sat quietly in the dark, waiting for dawn to break over a town, not yet ready for the storm about to roll through. It was just past 5:30. That fragile hour when the night hadn't fully relinquished its hold and dawn had yet to offer the comfort of daylight. Outside, the wind rustled quietly through the trees that lined the precinct parking lot, whispering of rain, change, and the quiet weight of things about to break open. Inside the dim confines of his cruiser, Travis sat motionless, staring down at the weathered revolver resting across his lap. The walnut grip was polished smooth from the sweat and vigilance of 2 generations. His father's service weapon carried through fires, through floods, through nights darker than this. Now it was his. Shadow watched from the passenger seat, ears lifted, eyes quiet and clear, no judgment, just patient expectation. Dogs never rushed decisions. They simply waited, believing their human counterparts would find the courage they already held. With a slow exhale, Travis picked up the revolver and loaded the chambers one by one, the metallic click of each cartridge settling like punctuation marks in a sentence he'd been writing in his heart since childhood. A story born of loss, silence, and the unanswered questions he'd carried since the day his father didn't come home. He snapped the cylinder shut softly, the sound resonating gently through the vehicle, reverberating with quiet finality. Travis had always hoped that the truth would feel good, that justice would warm him. But tonight, Justice felt cold and heavy in his hands, a burden as much as a salvation. Turning slightly, Travis reached out and ran his hand through Shadow's thick fur, feeling the animal's calm pulse beneath his palm. He wondered briefly how much Shadow understood about the gravity of tonight. If the German shepherd sensed that this wasn't just another call, another door breached, another life saved. Tonight was different. Shadow looked back at him, eyes deep and knowing. "I know you've always got my back, buddy," Travis murmured quietly, the words slipping out like a whispered prayer. "But tonight might get ugly." Shadow didn't move away. He pressed closer instead, leaning gently against Travis's side, an affirmation of trust so quiet and unconditional that Travis's throat tightened. They had both survived too much to stop now. Travis reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, feeling for the USB drive, checking once more that it was secure. It was evidence. It was proof. But more importantly, it was Ember's voice, her courage, carefully hidden by a child too young to understand corruption, yet old enough to know fear. He closed his eyes for a moment, seeing again the drawing Ember had made the desperate lines. The woman beneath the stairs, the silent plea scribbled in childish handwriting. "Please don't tell him." Travis had heard those words before, spoken quietly by his own mother late at night, a lifetime ago. Back then, he'd been too small to act, too powerless to protect. Tonight, he was neither. Opening his eyes, he glanced out through the windshield toward the precinct, the soft yellow glow of office lights hinting at the facade of normalcy inside. Deputy Chief Alan Drexler would be arriving soon, walking confidently through halls he believed he owned, trusting in a system he'd twisted to hide his secrets. But Drexler didn't know what Travis knew, that tonight, secrets had lost their power. Tonight, truth was more dangerous than a bullet. Travis checked his phone once more. A single notification glowed gently on the screen. Judge Teller. Warrant signed. Active immediately. A small exhale of relief escaped him. Maeve Hastings had come through, quiet and careful, honoring decades of loyalty to Travis's father and to Waverly Falls. Now, nothing stood between Travis and justice except the cold, steady pull of the trigger. He opened his car door softly, boots crunching on the gravel as he stepped out. The pre-dawn air was crisp, edged with the scent of approaching rain and freshly turned earth. It smelled like the morning after a funeral, solemn and waiting. Shadow moved silently to his side, nose lifted slightly, ears swiveling attentively. Travis clipped his badge firmly to his belt, feeling its familiar weight. Beside it, he holstered his father's revolver, the grip cool against his palm. He adjusted his jacket, ensuring the weapon stayed concealed but accessible. He knelt briefly beside Shadow, looking deep into the dog's clear, steady gaze. "You ready?" Shadow didn't bark, didn't move abruptly. He merely leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently to Travis's chest. A quiet, solid reassurance that needed no translation. Travis nodded once, throat tightening again. "Me too." Together they moved across the parking lot, footsteps quiet and measured. Above them, the clouds thickened, the wind whispering louder through the trees, a herald of what lay ahead. Travis could feel the weight of his father's legacy pressing on him, heavy but comforting, a silent promise of strength and resolve. Approaching the precinct doors, he paused, hand hovering briefly above the cold steel handle. He took a slow, steady breath, centering himself, knowing that once he stepped inside, nothing would ever be the same again. Shadows that had lingered for years would finally be brought to light. For Ember, who had carried secrets too heavy for her small shoulders. For Samantha, whose strength had nearly been buried forever beneath the cellar floor. For his father, whose silence had lasted far too long. He pushed the door open, feeling Shadow move seamlessly beside him, the dog's presence steady and reassuring. Inside, the corridor was quiet, offices darkened and empty. Travis glanced at the clock on the wall, 5:47 a.m. Drexler would be here in minutes, swaggering in with coffee and confidence, believing himself untouchable. But no one was untouchable. Not tonight. Travis moved quietly toward Drexler's office, stepping softly over worn carpet and past framed commendations, empty trophies of a system too easily manipulated. He paused outside Drexler's door, hand resting lightly on the grip of his revolver, Shadow standing calmly beside him. Tonight, justice wasn't just paperwork. It was action. It was courage in the face of decades of silence and fear. Travis knew, deep down, that nothing worth fighting for was ever safe, ever easy. But it was always worth it. He glanced down at Shadow, feeling the steady gaze of the dog who'd seen him through everything. Fires, storms, silent grief. "Let's go make things right, buddy," Travis whispered, voice steady, heart resolved. "It's time." Shadow leaned in close, solid as truth itself. They stepped forward together, into the quiet darkness, ready to wake the storm. The morning sun never truly rose over Waverly Falls that day. A thick amber haze hung in the air, as if the town itself held its breath. Warm wind stirred dust and carried the faint scent of smoke, something old and burned. Travis parked the cruiser outside Drexler's house on Briar Lane. It loomed like a relic, Victorian, pristine, and far too polished for the man who lived there. Today, the front door hung ajar, creaking softly in the breeze. No sign of a break-in, just a vacancy that felt intentional. Shadow stepped out first, nose twitching. Travis followed, hand resting on his father's revolver. The silence felt unnatural, staged. Inside, the house had been stripped bare. Family photos gone. Drawers emptied. A scorched smell lingered in the air, not fire, but something close. In the office, a toppled file cabinet and shredded documents told of a hasty purge. A single ceramic ashtray still held a smoldering cigarette. "He was just here," Travis muttered. Shadow pawed at the rug. Beneath it, a metal hatch, freshly scratched. Empty. Whatever Drexler had kept there was gone. Shadow suddenly turned, muscles tense. He darted toward the kitchen, stopping at the open back door. Boot prints crossed the porch, leading into the woods behind the property. Shadow looked back at Travis, gaze sharp and unmistakable. This wasn't panic. This was planned. Escape. Travis followed into the thicket, branches clawing at his coat. They reached a shallow ridge. Tire tracks. Fresh. Government issue, likely. An SUV had waited here. Drexler was gone, but not without leaving a trail. Shadow sniffed the air and let out a low, purposeful huff. "You've got him?" Travis asked. Shadow moved, not searching anymore, pursuing. The old lumber yard on Waverly's Edge was once the town's lifeblood. Now, it was abandoned skeletons of corrugated iron and rusted beams. But tonight, it wasn't empty. A helicopter sat idle at the far end, unmarked and humming low, its blades cutting through fog like a whisper of urgency. Travis and Shadow moved through shadows, silent, tracking. Then movement. Colt Merrigan stumbled into view, gaunt and fraying, dragging a duffel bag and clutching a pistol. Sweat drenched his face despite the chill. He looked at the chopper like it was salvation. "Colt!" Travis stepped out. "Don't move." Colt froze. The pistol trembled in his hand. "You shouldn't be here." Shadow growled low, circling. "You think you're getting on that bird after what you've done?" Travis asked, voice tight. Colt's eyes darted. "I was following orders." That excuse died a long time ago. You tied a mother beneath her home. You left her. You knew about the girl. "I didn't touch the kid," Colt blurted, panic in his voice. "I didn't know she got out." "You didn't report her missing." "Ugh. Because Drexler said it would complicate things." He called her a liability. Travis took a step forward. "Say it." Colt's voice cracked. "Drexler gave the order." "The order for what?" Colt hesitated. The chopper's side door opened. A man in black motioned frantically. "Now." Colt's voice dropped. "To keep her quiet. Like your father." Silence. The world narrowed. Even the rotor blades felt far away. "What did you say?" Travis asked. Colt's face twisted. "It wasn't a hunting accident. Drexler said your old man was sniffing too close. Said one incident in the woods would fix it. And it did, didn't it? Look at you. A shell." The rage in Travis wasn't explosive. It was deep, ancient. He spoke quietly. "You're going to testify." Colt laughed bitterly. "You think I'll live to testify? That bird's not extraction. It's cleanup." Shadow barked once sharp. Colt flinched. "Put the gun down, Colt," Travis said, stepping closer. Colt raised the gun, not at Travis, but toward himself. Shadow lunged. In a flash, Colt spun the gun toward the dog. Travis fired. The shot dropped Colt to the ground, his shoulder blooming red. The pistol skidded across gravel. Shadow stood firm, untouched, growling low. Travis moved fast, pinning Colt's arms and securing him with zip ties. "You're not dying tonight," he said. "You're going to answer for everything." Colt groaned. "They'll kill me." "No," Travis said, tightening the restraint. "You already made your choice. Now you live with it." The helicopter began to rise. The pilot, realizing the mission had failed, disappeared into the fog, a ghost vanishing into silence. But it was too late. The name had been spoken. The truth cracked open. Travis stood over Colt, chest heaving. Not with vengeance, but with understanding. His father hadn't been paranoid. He hadn't stumbled. He had been silenced. And now finally, they had proof. Shadow nudged Travis's leg. The dog's body relaxed, but his eyes remained fixed on the dark sky, already searching, already hunting what came next. "This is just the start," Travis murmured. And somewhere in the distance, under trees that had seen too much, justice the kind with teeth had begun its run. Shadow paced slowly around him, never barking, never lunging, just watching, his eyes sharp, measuring, as if he understood that this man wasn't the monster, only the shadow of one. A pawn who had outlived his usefulness. Travis stood a few feet back, sidearms still lowered but ready. Rain had begun to fall soft at first, whispering over the crumpled crates and rusted barrels of the lumberyard. The kind of rain that blurred the edges of everything, softened anger into something else, something harder to name. Colt looked up, dazed. "You don't get it, do you?" His voice was quieter now, less venom, more vacancy. "You think putting me in cuffs fixes it?" Drexler's not the top. He was just the one who smiled the best. Travis didn't answer. He slipped the cuffs tighter and patted Colt down with a precision that came not from duty but from habit born of loss. Every motion methodical, controlled. That kind of stillness only came after years of carrying pain you weren't allowed to speak of. "I used to believe we were doing good," Colt muttered, head hanging. "Used to think I was protecting something." Travis met his eyes. There was no rage left in his own, only an exhaustion that came from seeing too much rot behind too many badges. "You were protecting men like Drexler," Travis said quietly. "Now you'll help tear them down." A hollow laugh escaped Colt's throat. "You really believe that? They'll bury this so deep. They buried my father." Travis cut in, voice steel under the rain. "And I'm still digging." And Shadow stepped in close now, stopping just behind Colt. He didn't growl, didn't bark. He simply stood there, an unmoving sentinel, his breath quiet, his presence louder than any words. Colt turned slightly, his expression finally cracking. There was no hatred, no defiance, just ruin. The ruin of a man who once thought himself a soldier, then a protector, and finally became nothing but a tool dulled, discarded, and now broken under the weight of a truth too late. "I was in that house," Colt whispered. "I heard her crying under the stairs. I ate dinner while she screamed." Travis didn't blink. "You'll get to explain all of that," he said. "To a judge? To the people Samantha Quinn never stopped fighting for? To the girl who kept the only evidence safe in a backpack full of broken crayons?" At that, Colt flinched. Shadow growled, then low, guttural, like thunder rolling far off in the pines. The storm was still coming. A cruiser's headlights sliced through the fog as Officer Rivas pulled up along the yard's edge. Doors opened. The silence broke. Travis handed Colt off without a word. Rivas took one look at Colt, then at Travis, and simply nodded the kind of nod two good men give each other in a world where good men are always outnumbered. As the back door of the cruiser slammed shut behind Colt Merrigan, Shadow sat beside Travis, eyes tracking the red and blue flash that painted the falling rain. The kind of light that once meant safety, but now just meant something was finally being seen. Travis exhaled slowly, not out of relief, but readiness. The pawn had been captured. The board was changing. Justice had begun to move, and this time it wasn't stopping. The silence in Deputy Chief Drexler's office didn't feel like the absence of noise. It felt like something was listening. Rain ticked softly against the bulletproof windows as Travis stepped inside, flashlights sweeping across the dark-paneled walls. Officer Taryn Monroe followed close behind, gun drawn, eyes sharp. Her voice was low and dry, barely a whisper. "No sign of forced entry," He didn't need to force it, Travis replied. He built this place. Behind them, the door clicked softly shut as Shadow entered, head low, nose twitching. His paws made no sound on the polished floor. He sniffed once at the threshold, then moved guided not by sight, but by something older, something truer. Travis knew the room well, or at least thought he had. For years, this had been where decisions were made, promotions given, warnings issued in smiles, a shrine to bureaucracy. Now, it felt like a mausoleum. Framed commendations lined the walls, rows of black and white photographs, each showing Drexler standing beside various state officials, dignitaries, and military brass. A man who had made himself part of the furniture. Unmovable, untouchable. Until tonight. Shadow paused near the bookshelf, then sat. Still. Focused. Travis stepped closer, tapping his gloved fingers along the shelves. The air shifted slightly when his hand reached the fourth row. One title was too pristine, no dust, unlike the others. He pulled it. A soft click answered. The bottom drawer of the adjacent cabinet slid open, not with the grind of aged metal, but the oiled ease of something used more often than it should have been. Taryn let out a quiet breath. He didn't even try to hide it well. He didn't have to, Travis muttered, kneeling. Inside the drawer were 3 black leather-bound notebooks, a bundle of foreign banknotes, Swiss francs and Hong Kong dollars, and 5 flash drives. Each was identical, matte black casing, no label except a single seal etched onto the surface. Department of Defense? Shadow gave a quiet whine, not from distress, but urgency. He pawed once at the drawer, then stepped back, watching Travis with that eerie, ancient knowing. Travis picked up one of the black books, flipping it open. Taryn leaned in, her breath catching. Names, dates, locations, payments, contracts for consulting services from companies that didn't exist, invoices from front orgs in Eastern Europe and the Middle East, and signatures not Drexler's, but others. High level, federal, shorthand initials that whispered of invisible walls and closed-door deals. It's not just him, Taryn said. Number he was the rot we could see, Travis replied. The roots go deeper. He picked up one of the USB drives and pocketed it carefully. 2 more went into a separate evidence pouch. The last 2 he handed to Taryn. Log those when we're off-site. Air-gapped. No precinct server. She nodded. You think it's safe to open them? Number. That's why I want it done. He stood and turned toward the desk, the last place left unchecked. Shadow had wandered toward it, then stopped beside the chair. He was staring at the floor now, not moving. Travis crouched, shining his light beneath the desk. There, taped to the underside of the drawer, was a smaller envelope. No label, just sealed with wax, dark crimson, almost black in the beam. He pried it loose and slid it open with his pocket knife. Inside, a photo, not of Drexler, not of a victim. It was of Travis's father, Sheriff Eli West, standing with Drexler in this very office. But the date in the corner read 3 weeks before Eli's accidental death. There was writing on the back, faint and cursive. He knew. He tried to warn them. They didn't listen. Travis's throat tightened. He turned to Shadow, who met his gaze and gently rested his head against Travis's shin, a silent gesture of grounding, of now. Taryn spoke again, softly. What do we do with this? We finish it, Travis said. No red tape. No more buried files. He straightened, pocketing the photo. This isn't about clearing my father's name anymore. It's about making sure the next girl doesn't end up drawing her mother tied under stairs. Shadow let out a low breath, almost a sigh. The office had given up its ghosts. But the war they were stepping into, that was only just beginning. The wind over Snow Ridge carried a bite that felt older than the season. Sharp, watching. Travis stood by the edge of the airfield, frost crunching beneath his boots. The sky above was bruised with the last light of dusk, smeared orange-gray over a stretch of snow-covered ridgelines and skeletal pine. Everything was quiet, except for the low hum in his earpiece and the distant throb of rotor blades, growing louder. They spotted it. Taryn's voice crackled through the radio from the SUV behind him. Sheriff's drone picked up a helicopter circling eastward. Tailcode matches Drexler's clearance. Travis didn't speak. He didn't have to. Shadow, standing alert beside him, already knew. The German shepherd's ears were pricked, body tense as a bowstring, eyes fixed on the eastern horizon. There was something about that dog, a way his silence seemed less like obedience and more like a pact. a shared oath in the dark. The chopper appeared moments later, a dark silhouette skimming low between the treetops. Civilian paint job, but military-born in every line. Fast, ruthless. It dipped once over the ridge before angling toward the field's far end. Signal's hot, he's trying to land. Terran again. Don't let him, Travis said into the mic. Flank him wide, block the strip. Behind him, 3 black patrol SUVs roared to life, kicking up slush as they peeled out across the frostbitten airstrip. Their headlights swept through the dusk, beams slicing the falling mist like searchlights over a battlefield. The helicopter wobbled slightly as the driver spotted them too late. The snowbanks to the east were too thick. To the west, forest. Only one clear patch remained, and it was now swallowed by steel and red-blue strobes. Trapped. The chopper hovered midair for a tense 5 seconds, nose twitching as if considering a straight vertical escape, but the drone above it now loomed like a silent hunter, blinking red. Live streaming everything. Land it, Travis muttered, his breath steaming. Land it now. And Drexler did. The skids hit down hard, graceless, fast. The engine idled. Travis didn't wait. He moved. Shadow at his side. Each footstep deliberate over packed ice. No sirens. No shouting. Just that rising silence, the kind before something collapses. Terran and 2 deputies formed a V around the helicopter as Travis approached the side door, which was still sealed. Shadow stood between him and the blades, tail low, shoulders squared. Then the latch clicked. The door opened. Alan Drexler sat inside, hands visible, face calm, in the way only men who believed they were untouchable could be. He looked almost amused, his overcoat pristine, collar folded perfectly. The wind didn't touch him. Well, Drexler said, voice nearly lost to the rotors. This is all rather dramatic, don't you think? Travis didn't answer. He stared, really stared, and saw it. Not the man who had smiled at his father's funeral. Not the man who handed him his first badge with a firm grip and hollow eyes. But the man behind it, all the rot in the root system, smiling like he still believed the world owed him silence. You ran, Travis finally said. No, Drexler replied, stepping down slowly, boots crunching snow. I adjusted. Terran moved to cuff him, but Travis raised a hand. Not yet. He stepped closer. Shadow stayed just behind. You murdered my father, Travis said, and you put a little girl in a hole. Drexler tilted his head. Your father died hunting, if I recall. As for the girl, well, troubled families are not a crime. The slap wasn't physical, but it hit just the same. Travis took another step forward. The cold didn't seem to touch him anymore. We have recordings, he said. Files, the USBs. And Colt? He talked. Something flickered behind Drexler's eyes, brief, then buried. But Shadow caught it. The dog let out a low, growling breath. Not loud, not threatening, just steady. You've lost, Travis said. I don't lose, Drexler answered quietly. But this time, even he didn't seem to believe it. Travis nodded to Terran. She moved quickly, professionally cuffing Drexler's hands behind his back. He didn't resist, just stood there, surrounded by wind and armed silence, like a king whose throne had finally turned to ash. As they led him toward the vehicle, Shadow fell in beside them, not barking, not even watching Drexler. His gaze was on Travis, calm, unmoving. It wasn't vengeance. It wasn't victory. It was movement. The wheel of justice, long rusted, had turned. The wind had stilled. Snow Ridge lay in a hush of winter silence, the kind that blankets not just the ground but the soul itself, muting things too loud to say. The hum of the helicopter faded into the hush of patrol radios and the soft crunch of boots over frost. Red and blue lights cast a muted glow over the field, refracted in ice crystals that hung like dust in the air. Alan Drexler stood just beyond the patrol SUV, his coat still sharp, but the arrogance clinging to it had begun to thaw. His breath fogged in the cold, but his gaze remained steel, not shaken, just waiting, calculating. Travis approached slowly. He didn't rush, he didn't shout, he didn't need to. Shadow trailed beside him, just off to the right, ears forward, every step silent. The German shepherd's gaze was locked not on Drexler but on Travis, steady, watchful, ready. Taryn held Drexler by one arm, but when Travis came within arm's reach, she stepped back without a word. This was his to finish. Travis reached into his vest, withdrew the cuffs with calm, deliberate motion. Drexler lifted his hands. "Your father," Drexler began, voice low and curdled with contempt, "wasn't stupid, just persistent." Travis didn't answer. He took Drexler's right wrist first. The man didn't flinch. He started digging where he wasn't supposed to. You know that, don't you? The left wrist clicked into the steel. The metal echoed faintly in the night. "He asked too many questions," Drexler continued. "And questions can be dangerous." That was when Travis looked up, and their eyes met. For the first time, truly. One set cold with power that thought itself permanent. The other carved from loss, memory, and something deeper than revenge. A promise. Travis spoke, voice like gravel beneath frozen water. "I ask better ones." Drexler's expression faltered. Not much a half-second crack at the corner of his mouth. But it was there. And Shadow felt it. The dog stepped closer, not aggressive, but present as if anchoring the moment. He tilted his head, watching Drexler the way a creature of instinct sees through the masks men wear. Travis gave a soft tug on the chain between the cuffs. Drexler stumbled forward slightly. "You took years from me," Travis said. "From my family, from Samantha Quinn, from a child." Drexler said nothing. "Now I take them back." Behind them, a hush settled over the deputies. Nobody moved. Nobody needed to. Shadow shifted position again, his flank brushing lightly against Travis's leg just once. A grounding. "Get him out of here," Travis said to Taryn without looking away. "Now." She moved in, taking Drexler by the arm. But as she did, Drexler gave one last glance, not of regret, not of defiance, but of something darker. He leaned in, breath visible against the air, and whispered, "It never ends with me, Rowan. There's always someone above the strings." Travis didn't flinch. He just looked at him long and deep, like someone staring not at a man, but at a story that had tried to bury itself in silence. And then he said almost quietly, "Good. I'm not done asking." They walked Drexler away. Shadow sat now, breath rising in quiet clouds. He didn't look at the other officers, just kept his gaze fixed where Drexler had stood like he was still watching what lingered, not what left. Travis finally exhaled. The case that began in darkness had not ended in light, not yet. But the rot had been named. And sometimes that was how healing began. Not with justice, but with remembering, with eyes that didn't look away. The courtroom was heavy with silence, the kind that comes before a storm. Travis sat in uniform, unarmed, Shadow at his feet, still but alert. At the defense table stood Colt Merrigan, gaunt but no longer trembling. Across from him, Alan Drexler sat rigid, face taut with denial. Judge Hamilton spoke with measured weight. "In the matter of the state versus Colt Merrigan, this court acknowledges your service, trauma, and mental evaluations. But none of that excuses what came next." Colt didn't raise his head. "You unlawfully detained a civilian and a minor, obstructed justice, assaulted officers, and fled custody. For these crimes, this court sentences you to 30 years in federal prison." No reaction, just a quiet exhale, acceptance. Then the judge turned. "Mr. Drexler, you stand not as a scapegoat, but as a man who knowingly corrupted the system. You silenced truth. You erased people." The courtroom stirred. Travis lowered his gaze, his hand brushing Shadow's fur. "You orchestrated the murder of Sheriff Elijah Rowan. There is no remorse. For your crimes, conspiracy, abuse of office, premeditated murder, you are sentenced to life imprisonment without parole." A gasp echoed. Drexler didn't speak, but his face cracked. Reality had finally reached him. The gavel fell. This court is adjourned. People whispered prayers. Shadow stood, calm, deliberate. Travis rose too steadied by the weight lifting from his chest after years of silent knots. Outside the doors, snow was falling again, soft and quiet. Not bitter, cleansing. The badge in Travis's hand felt heavier now, not metal, but meaning. There was no parade, just a vote. He was now Chief Travis Rowan. No fanfare, just respect. The precinct had changed. The hallways no longer hummed with fear but carried the breath of beginning again. And every morning at 6:55, Shadow arrived not because he had to, because he chose to. "Morning, Chief," Officer Tarrant said, handing him the clipboard. "Family from Meadow Ridge left flowers. Note says, 'Thank you for believing my daughter.'" Travis didn't respond, just nodded, jaw set. "One flag, sir." She pointed to a report. House 27, abandoned. But a rookie had heard movement. A child's laugh. Then nothing. Could be squatters. Or ghosts. Travis stared for a moment longer. "Ghosts deserve peace too." She smiled faintly. "We'll sweep it again. Carefully." Outside the room, a new plaque read, "In honor of Shadow. K9 to 73. Protector. Witness. Partner. Friend. He served not with commands, but with courage." Some touched it like it held something sacred. Maybe it did. At the close of briefing, Travis tapped the table twice, their unspoken signal. "We're done for now." That day, Shadow didn't move immediately. His eyes stayed on the door. Outside, school buses rumbled by. A boy laughed in the distance. Spring wasn't blooming yet, just softening mud and cracked windows, enough to breathe again. As Travis stepped into the cold, the air no longer stung. Ember and Samantha stood nearby. The girl offered a dog treat. "For him," she said. Shadow walked to her, sat, and bowed his head to accept it. Travis knelt beside them. "Still remembering the way out?" he asked. Ember nodded. "But I like the front door better now." "So do I," Samantha whispered. And for a moment they just stood, a mother healing, a child free, a tired man lighter, and a dog who had always stood guard. Quiet, steady, unasked, but always there. The park was small, framed by 2 oaks older than the town hall. Beneath the gazebo, a podium waited. Flags rippled in spring breeze. People gathered, coats wrapped, hearts open. Ember stood near Samantha, fidgeting with her cardigan hem. Her shoes were polished, her hair braided with care. She looked both nervous and brave. Shadow lay beside her, wearing his honorary vest. K9 unit. Shadow, protector of Ember Quinn. Ava's idea. Travis hadn't argued. Mayor Maeve Hastings stepped forward. "No politics, just grace. We've had enough darkness. Today we honor something brighter." She looked at Ember. Courage doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it whispers, tells a truth, or holds a hand. Ember reminded us what bravery looks like. The crowd stirred. Teachers, neighbors, officers with heads bowed. Some children held signs. One read, "Ember equals Braveheart." Travis approached. "In uniform. Calm. Kind." He crouched beside Ember. "Ready?" She nodded. Serious. Like that night with the stairs and the woman no one believed was real. From a velvet box, he pulled out a tiny silver badge, looped with a pink ribbon. "Honorary Officer, Ember Quinn, for valor, voice, vision." He pinned it gently to her cardigan. She stared at it like it was something sacred. Then, slowly, she smiled. The kind that made people go quiet. The kind that stitched things back together. Samantha cried silently. "I'm proud of you." "I know," Ember said softly. Behind them, Shadow stood. No bark, just presence, like always. Travis addressed the town. No talk of the trial. No names of villains. Just light. "She didn't just survive," he said. "She led us. She reminded us that the truth, no matter how small the voice, heals when it's heard." Applause swelled. The church bell rang once. Shadow huffed. His tail thumped once. Ember giggled. "I think he likes my badge." Travis smiled. He always liked the brave ones. She hugged Shadow tight. He leaned in the way dogs do when trust runs deep. Someone took a photo. That image would hang for years inside the new community center. A girl in a yellow cardigan, arms around a weathered dog, both wearing badges, both having earned them the hard way. As the crowd thinned, Ember tugged at Travis's sleeve. "Chief? Yeah, kiddo. I think I want to be a real officer one day." He didn't patronize her. He believed her. "You already are." And in the soft light of spring, in a town learning to listen again, A girl and her dog stood side by side, proof that healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet and bright and real. The heart of Grapevine had always been the square. Older folks still called it Founders Rest, though no one could quite remember who the founders were anymore. It was a place where farmers' markets sprouted on weekends, where teenagers once snuck their first cigarettes, and where the town Christmas tree stood tall every December. But today, something new would stand there. Not tall, not loud, but lasting. A low wooden platform had been set up where the cobblestone met the grass. Folding chairs were arranged in semicircles, their metal legs digging gently into thawing soil. There was no grand fanfare, no press, just neighbors and time. Travis stood beside Ember at the edge of the platform. She wore her yellow cardigan again, the same one from the ceremony weeks before, but now with her silver badge clipped proudly at the pocket. The pink ribbon had faded slightly. Still, she'd insisted on wearing it. Beside her, Shadow sat like a sentinel, his coat brushed and his eyes calm. Samantha stood behind them, hands on Ember's shoulders, her presence silent, but strong the way only mothers who've returned from places no one should go can be. Mayor Hastings stepped forward, a paper in her hand, but she didn't read from it. "This town has seen hurt," she began. "We've also seen healing, and we've seen how it starts not from those in power, but from those who dare to speak even when no one is listening. She nodded toward Ember, then gestured to the cloth-draped statue beside her. "This isn't about grand gestures. It's about remembering the small ones that saved lives." With that, she pulled the cloth away. There was no figure, no heroic pose, just a sculpture, cast in bronze, of a small backpack slightly open with a child's worn hoodie peeking from the top. Next to it, hanging delicately from a curved branch of metal, was a replica of the silver pendant Ember had clutched that rainy night when she first found Travis. The pendant's chain had a twist in it, just like the real one. A detail so small most would miss it, but someone had noticed. Someone had remembered. The inscription at the base was etched in quiet lettering. Sometimes, the smallest voices carry the greatest truth. In honor of all who speak and all who listen. For a moment, no one moved. Not because they didn't know what to do, but because they felt it, the weight of it. This wasn't a statue that shouted. It didn't demand applause. It simply existed, like the truth itself, overlooked, nearly invisible, until someone looks closer. Ember stepped toward it. She knelt, her hand reaching out, fingertips grazing the metal pendant. Her lips moved, though no sound came. Travis caught the motion. She said, "That's it," he whispered to Samantha. "That's the way it was when she found it." Samantha nodded, her eyes glassed with quiet pride. Shadow stood beside Ember, lowering his head until his muzzle touched the edge of the bronze backpack, a soft, reverent gesture as if he too understood. Travis approached the mic. He didn't speak like a chief of police. He spoke like a man who'd seen what happens when silence is weaponized, and how a whisper, when heard, becomes a roar. "This statue isn't about heroes," he said. "It's about memory, about what we overlook because it's too small, too young, too broken to believe. But truth, real truth, doesn't shout, it knocks." He looked at Ember. And this little girl knocked, and we finally opened the door. Soft applause rose, not loud, but honest. One by one, people approached the statue. Some left flowers, some just stood. One elderly man pressed an old sheriff's badge into the soil nearby and said nothing. Travis recognized him, a deputy from his father's day. He'd resigned after the hunting accident. Now he cried openly, head bowed, hand resting on the bronze backpack like it was holy. The sun crept higher, the shadows shifted, but the statue stayed still, quiet, and listening. Travis turned to Ember. "You okay?" She nodded, wiping her cheek with the back of her hand. "I think she would have liked this," she said softly. "Your mom?" "No. The other me. The me that thought nobody ever would believe." Travis crouched beside her. "She's still here," he said, and we believed her. From across the square, Ava arrived with warm cocoa for Ember and a thermos for Travis. She handed Shadow a biscuit from her coat pocket, a ritual now, and the old shepherd accepted it with a slow tail wag. The town lingered. Some folks stayed longer than others, But even after they drifted back to their lives, the statue remained not as a monument to what was lost, but a reminder of what was found. A voice. A girl. A truth too quiet for most to hear until someone finally did. And in the middle of Grapevine, as pigeons fluttered across early spring skies and the wind carried the soft scent of thawed earth, the metal pendant swayed gently from its branch. Listening. Always listening. The office wasn't much. Scuffed floorboards. A desk older than Travis. A single window with warped glass that made Main Street look like it wavered with memory. But it was his now. Chief Travis Hale, it still sounded strange in his ears, even after the plaque had gone up. He hadn't changed much, save for the weight of what had to be carried. The badge felt heavier. Somehow, not in a bad way, just full. He moved quietly through the space, the way his father used to, not out of habit, but reverence. He left the lights dim, just the desk lamp warm and steady, casting a soft circle of amber over the paperwork he hadn't touched since morning. Shadow stirred from the corner, lifting his head from where it rested near the heater. His ears perked, but he didn't move. He didn't have to. He knew Travis wasn't going far. Travis opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a worn manila envelope, its edges softened by time. He pulled it out slowly, like handling something sacred. From it, he retrieved the first photo, edges curled, colors faded. A man in uniform, mustache thick, smile crooked and genuine, holding a baby bundled in a flannel blanket, with eyes wide like they'd just landed on Earth. His father. And him. Travis brushed a thumb across the image, tracing the old sheriff's nameplate. "Still trying to fill your boots, old man," he murmured. He reached for the wooden frame he'd set aside earlier, simple, made from reclaimed barnwood, and slid the photo inside. The glass caught the light, throwing a glint that shimmered like morning sun on old memories. He set it gently on the left side of the desk, facing inward. Always there. Always watching. Then, from a folder marked miscellaneous, he pulled out a second photo. This one was newer, still had that crispness in the paper. No creases, no dust. It had arrived in the mail just last week, an unexpected gift from Ava, who'd happened to be walking by at the right moment. In the photo, they were standing under the cherry blossoms in Willow Park. It was early spring. The petals had just begun to fall soft pink against the air, like a hush made visible. Travis stood slightly to the side, not quite smiling, but not quite serious either. His arm rested gently on Samantha's shoulder. She wore a loose denim jacket, one hand on Ember's back. And Ember, her hair in uneven pigtails, had her arms flung around Shadow's neck like he was made of stuffed cotton, not 90 pounds of German shepherd muscle. Her eyes squinted with laughter. Shadow, naturally, looked unimpressed, but enduring. There was something in the way they stood. Not posed, not forced, just together. A moment, held still. Travis framed this one too, slid it carefully into the matching frame, then set it on the opposite side of the desk across from the photo of him and his father. He leaned back in the chair. The wood creaked. The silence settled. And for a moment, the office became a bridge between two lifetimes. One picture, yellowed with time, holding the weight of legacy. The other, fresh and breathing, carrying the promise of what comes next. He let the quiet hold him. Shadow rose then, as he always did, when the silence turned thoughtful and padded across the floor. His nails clicked against wood. He rested his head on Travis's knee. "You think he'd be proud?" Travis asked softly. Shadow didn't move, just exhaled. Travis chuckled under his breath. "Yeah, I guess you're right. Probably say I took too long." He reached down and scratched behind Shadow's ear. Slow, familiar, grounding. The photos stayed silent, but in their own way, they spoke. Of grief that had been faced, of truths uncovered, of a town pulled back from the edge, not by force, but by small voices and the men and dogs who listened. A knock at the door broke the hush. Ava leaned in, holding 2 mugs. "You forgot your coffee again," she said, setting one down. "And before you ask, yes, it's decaf. You're wired enough already." He took it with a half smile. "Thanks." Her eyes flicked to the 2 photos. "Looks good," she said. "Balances the room." Travis nodded. One's where I came from, the other's where I'm going. She leaned against the doorframe. Funny, she said. How you think it takes blood and noise to change a town. Turns out it just needed a girl with a necklace and a dog that wouldn't give up. Travis's voice was soft. We were just lucky enough to be nearby. No, she said. You were decent enough to listen. She tapped the frame of the cherry blossom photo, then pushed off the doorframe. I'll be in the back if you need me. He watched her go, then glanced down at the two pictures once more. And slowly, as if sealing something sacred, Travis took a pen from the drawer and wrote a single word on a small piece of paper. He folded it and slid it under both frames. Belonging. Not justice, not closure, just the word that mattered now. Then he turned off the desk lamp. The room dimmed, but the light between the frames, between memory and meaning, lingered. The night laid itself gently over the town of Snow Ridge, like a blanket finally washed clean after a long winter. The streets outside were still, hushed in the kind of peace that wasn't loud or showy, just there, like a steady heartbeat. Porch lights glowed. Wind chimes whispered softly over backyards. And for the first time in years, the station didn't feel like a place waiting for the next shoe to drop. Inside the modest cabin on the edge of Timber Creek, the fire had burned low. Only a few amber tongues still flickered in the hearth, casting shadows across the living room walls, shadows that danced slow and calm, like memories exhaling. Travis sat in the armchair that once belonged to his father. The leather had cracked along the seams, but it held a shape that knew him, that knew grief and return. At his feet, Shadow lay curled, breathing slow and deep. His coat shimmered in the firelight, not quite black, not quite gray, like a storm cloud remembering the sun. Travis reached down and let his hand rest gently between the shepherd's ears. You tired, old boy? He asked softly. Shadow blinked, but didn't move. His body was still strong, but the weight of the years of what they'd seen, fought, saved, was finally showing in the way he sighed at night. A photo sat on the end table, not framed, just leaned there. It was the one Ember had drawn, not taken a crayon sketch of her family, where the heads were too big, the trees were purple, and everyone smiled with eyes closed. Shadow had wings in the picture. So did the little girl's stick figure self. Travis ran his thumb across the corner. You know, he murmured, voice nearly lost in the crackle of embers. I thought I was saving you that night. Shadow didn't steer, but something in the air shifted, like even silence was listening. Travis leaned forward. I thought I was doing something good, taking in a broken dog, fixing what someone else threw away. His hand slowed on Shadow's fur. But it wasn't me, was it? You found her. You found the trail. You brought us to the truth. A breath, fragile, full. He looked down. You didn't just find her, boy. His throat caught. Not because it hurt, but because the words were the kind that only mattered when spoken low and meant true. You found me, too. Shadow opened his eyes, just enough to meet his partner's. It wasn't a look of pride or understanding. It was older than both. Deeper. Like the quiet bond between souls who had stood together in places no map marked and come back, changed. A floorboard creaked behind them. Travis turned, just enough to see Ember in the doorway, blanket half-dragging behind her, eyes blinking against the dim light. I couldn't sleep, she whispered. He held out an arm, wordlessly. She crossed the room in 3 small steps and climbed up into his lap like she'd done 100 times before, blanket and all. Shadow adjusted only slightly, allowing her feet to brush against his side. I dreamed I was in the basement again, she mumbled into Travis's shoulder. He held her closer. But this time, I wasn't scared. Mommy was there. You were there. And Shadow had wings. Travis smiled, though his eyes blurred. Sounds about right. She yawned, curling into him like a question already answered. Do you think dogs go to heaven? She asked, voice already slipping into sleep. I think, Travis said slowly, some of them come from there in the first place. Her breath evened out against his chest. Shadow's tail thumped once a quiet agreement. Outside, the town exhaled. The last of the winter leaves drifted across the pavement like forgotten burdens finally let go. Somewhere in the dark, a church bell gave one soft chime. Just one. And the mountains, always watching, stood still. In the warmth of the fire, between the soft weight of a child and the steady presence of a dog who'd never needed words, Travis Hale, son of a fallen sheriff, now a man of his own, closed his eyes. Not because he was tired, but because, At last, there was nothing left to guard, only to be. In the quiet, beneath the blanket of night and memory, there sat three figures no headline would name, no history book would detail. A man, a girl, and a dog with ash on his paws and light in his eyes. Some would call them survivors. Others might say heroes. But in that room, lit by the last flicker of flame, they were something simpler, something greater. They were family. And outside, the world turned gently as if, for once, it didn't have to run. Sometimes, it's not the words we say, but the silent company we keep that saves us. If you've ever looked into the eyes of a dog and felt understood without having to explain a thing, then you already know. Loyalty like that doesn't fade. It stays, even in the quietest corners of our lives. German Shepherds have a way of showing us what love looks like without conditions. Whether they're leading us through danger or simply curling at our feet after a long day, they remind us that family isn't always human sometimes. It comes with fur and four paws. If this story moved something in you, maybe it's time to deepen that bond with your own dog. There's a little resource I've come across, nothing flashy, just something that might help you understand your dog a bit better, or maybe even help them understand you. I'll leave the link below in case your heart nudges you that way. And if you do check it out, do it not because someone told you to, but because your dog would follow you anywhere. Maybe this time, it's your turn to follow back.